Ethan Hunt and co are back to stop, well, more nukes. Plus Henry Cavill's here, and he's got a mustache that totally didn't get in the way of any other movies he was making at the time. Joking aside, this one is pretty well regarded, so join us as we discuss Mission Impossible Fallout. Welcome everyone to the Collector's Cut. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
Hope is not a strategy.
Yes, it is. I live by it every day. Welcome. This is a movie podcast, everyone. We are working through Mission Impossible season, and we are on to number 6, which is Mission Impossible Fallout. So we're getting very close to the new movie, only a couple entries away, but we'll start spoiler-free on this one, of course, as we always do. We'll give you a warning before we go into the spoilers, and if you are enjoying the show on YouTube, please do hit the like button. It helps us out a bunch, and of course you can support the show and get bonus shows that we do on Patreon, but I'll tell you more about that at the end of the episode. So yes, coming into number 6. I had seen this once. I did not see it in theaters, funnily enough. I think maybe 5 left a bad taste in my mouth. I didn't rush to see this when it came out. Not that I waited too long. I think I saw it maybe later that year. Like, it wasn't, it was like as soon as it was available at home, I think I saw it.
Yeah, I think that this one probably is the one that I felt would have been the most impressive in theaters, because I noticed more so than even the last movie, the amount of IMAX, the amount of just like how much they put into it.
Oh, what's interesting is I got a switching aspect ratio on this one for the IMAXs. Same. I did not get that in 5, if that was a thing in 5 as well.
I mean, it might be that 5 didn't have any IMAX, but I could have sworn it did.
There's a good chance it did, because there's a lot of other movies that have IMAX switching ratios on, say, the physical disc, but don't digitally. I was actually very surprised when this movie changed the aspect ratio. I went, oh, whoa, I'm getting the IMAX ratio for some of this. And even that's a lie, technically. The IMAX ratio was actually much taller than I think what this goes to. This is kind of like, this fits your TVs, is this, like, expanded IMAX version.
Is IMAX responsible for bringing back pan and scan? Is that what we're saying here?
Oh no, it's the opposite. IMAX has a lot more at the top and bottom to make use of the height of the gigantic screen that they have.
Gotcha.
I want to say there's a couple of different IMAX ratios. One's basically 4:3 or close to it, and then the other one's like 1.9 to 1, which is kind of close to 185. So actually, this may have been that. Actually, this may have been 1.9 to 1. Actually, now I'm thinking about it, because there was still little tiny black bars at the top and bottom. Anyway, I'm getting technical because I'm a nerd for aspect ratio stuff. Not to worry. It's over. It's done with. We'll get into the movie now. David's first time watching. I think what impressed me about this is that how much I had forgotten about this movie, because so much of it was like getting hit with this weird, like, oh yeah, this, and oh yeah, this, and I had forgotten so much of it. It was probably clear from the things I said in previous movies that I'd forgotten a lot of it, because I'd said a couple of things where this was like, clearly I did not remember in this movie. But yeah, although that said, this is very much in the era where there was multiple shots in this viewing where I remember going, oh yeah, I saw that in the trailer 20 times when it was playing before every movie in 2018 this came out.
Yeah, I think so. No, I wholly agree. There's so much of this where I'm like, wait a minute, this seems really familiar, but I know I haven't seen this before. And then I check out the trailer and it's like, oh, yeah, all of it is.
It's not even like the action bits per se. There's like one moment where Vanessa Kirby's like walking into a room and she looks over her shoulder, and that shot just hit me with this weird deja vu feeling. And it's just because, I remember that shot in the trailer because it was at a moment before the text came up saying, your mission, and then went on to the next bit or something. I don't know. Anyway, so yeah, we'll get into. I mean, the premise. Honestly, it feels silly to even try and give you a spoiler-free premise at this point. There's a bad guy. They're looking for plutonium because they want to set off nukes. Ethan and co must stop it. There you go. That's your premise. Anything else we'll save for spoilers.
I finished this movie, and then Paramount Plus is where it's available for me. They tried to play part 7 immediately, and the little info bit was Ethan and his IMF team must work to take down a terrorist before a big new weapon is used. I'm like, wow, that's all of them. You just said all of them. Congratulations.
So yeah, we'll get into things. We'll talk about the cast and stuff once we've done some general impressions and whatnot. But without further ado, David, what did you think of Mission Impossible Fallout, or as I like to call it, Mission Impossible and the mustache that ruined the Justice League? On you go.
Okay, just to tap on that for a second. Having now watched the movie, it feels so petty on like Viacom's part. It feels so, because there's no reason for like half the movie where they couldn't have just said like, it's so much easier to put on a prosthetic mustache than it is to digitally get rid of one. And it's not like there's anything in this that required him to have a mustache that is real. So yeah, it's petty, but whatever. I went into this one with a lot of promise. I think that like the first act to this one does a lot more to set up intrigue for me than a lot of the other films really did. But by the time we hit, I would say even before the second act, I was already feeling a bit tired of it. It feels like there's a lot that is stuff that we just did. There is an entire subplot in this movie that is directly the same subplot we just did in 5. And same for a lot of it. We got a lot of recurring characters on both good and bad. It feels less like a continuation from 5 and more like we still have these pieces out, so we may as well do something else with it. I don't know. I watched this and it had so much promise to begin with. I was really hoping for a lot more than what it was. And then by the time it got done, I kind of just felt underwhelmed. It didn't feel like it really did a whole lot there. In terms of stunts and such, which obviously are the big selling points here, I think there are a few really good ones. I do actually appreciate the third act like set piece that Tom Cruise is in, but it doesn't do enough to save the movie for me. I'm not saying it's bad, but I just feel like it's such a wasted opportunity for them to do something bigger with it.
That is a fascinating response to that question, because there's one particular thing you said that strikes me as the opposite of my feelings. And that part was where you said you liked the first act and then it went downhill. I am the complete opposite. I think the first act is the worst part of this movie. And I was so... Like, I came into this remembering, I think this might be like the second best one, but I didn't really remember why. It was just kind of like a vague feeling, right? So the movie starts... And I'm like, 20 minutes in, 30 minutes in, whatever, and I'm like, I think I misremembered this. This isn't that good. Like, it's just as convoluted, if not more convoluted than some of the other ones. I dislike some of the repeating things that they're doing, and that is still a bit of a problem later on as well. Don't get me wrong, it doesn't go away, but I was like, a couple of cool little moments aside, the first like 40 minutes, 50 minutes, I really wasn't feeling all that hot on, right? I was actively kind of like, no, this is repeating all the mistakes of prior movies. I'm actively not into this. And then it hits a point where it starts getting better. And it starts getting more better as it goes, where it started like, okay, we've done all the plot set up. Now we can just have fun doing the action set pieces. We can do the things that have been set up. And they even do a couple of little interesting things in the third act that I like. I think there's a good motorbike chase scene. I think there's a good, I'll just say a rooftop chase scene. I think there's all the helicopter stuff in the third act, I think is really fun. It's also the third act's where I feel like all the team feels that they've come together and they're all kind of involved, and there's a lot of like, relying on each other, which I think is some of the stuff that I like in these movies. For me, the first act is everything that's wrong with Mission Impossible. And then the rest of it is like, okay, I'm actually into this now. And it's not that the first act problems are like solved or anything. It's just that, okay, we've got it out of the way, so now I don't have to think about it anymore. Now I can just enjoy, we're trying to stop a bomb, and that's it, right? The simpler it becomes, the more I enjoy these movies. Because see when he gets the briefing at the start of this movie and there's like the message that plays and it gives so much exposition, I am like, F you movie, what are you doing? Do not just flood me with all these details and names and all this bullshit right away. I
agree. However, I finally managed to internalize your advice that you gave to me like 3 movies ago,
Okay.
which was just let that wash over you. Just assume that all of that is useless, and then we'll eventually get a character that basically does the in English please, and we get a totally stripped down version of it.
Yeah.
And that's what I did here. Like all of they go on and on about like, oh, ever since the last movie, there were these disciples of Solomon Lane, the apostles, and they're doing all this stuff. I'm like, don't care. None of this matters. What are we eventually going to end up with? And once they show what it is, I'm like, okay, that's simple, that's clear, let's move on.
That's the other thing, is they treat the villain from the last movie who reappears in this as like this important boogeyman, like the worst villain that Ethan Hunt ever faced. And I'm like, he was lame. I thought he was lame in the last movie, so I'm not suddenly going to act like it's a big deal that he's like still around in some form. I simply do not give a shit about him. So
well, that's why I dislike the back half, because that's where he rises to a little bit more prominence. In the first half, they talk about him, but he's not around. The back half is where he's a bit more present. No, I'm just like, you weren't imposing then, you're not imposing now. Please go away.
Yeah, but the talking about him is much worse, because the talking about him is where they talk about him like he's the goddamn boogeyman. They treat him like he's this like specter. He's this like thing that's haunting Ethan. In fact, the movie opens with Ethan having a nightmare scene about this guy. Like if I told you last movie, or even the first movie, at any point in the last 5 movies, if I said one of these movies is going to open with a dream sequence, you'd be like, what? That's not a Mission Impossible thing. They don't do dream sequences.
I mean, you're right. This isn't something they've done before, but it didn't feel entirely out of the realm of what they did. It's still within the fears and stuff that Ethan has. Again, for this first act, this first bit here, I think what I was more intrigued in, on top of, I think there are some clever little turnabouts here, the way that they do things. Not that they're impossible to predict. They're very easy to guess what's happening. But I think that is core Mission Impossible in terms of that subterfuge and flipping around and doing all that stuff, along with having a little bit of an action scene. I think the pivot point, and honestly, it sounds like it's the same pivot point between you and me, is right before the motorcycle chase scene. There's a real slowdown for quite some period, and I think that's where I started really losing interest, losing intrigue. The motorcycle chase was okay for a little bit of it, but I think it went on just a bit too long and didn't like introduce enough new things throughout. And then up until the end of the movie, it was just kind of like, all right, I know the beats that we're going with, and it just hit them at a snail's pace for me. Again, several of the set pieces I like individually, but it's not enough to get the whole movie passing grade for me.
That's all the best stuff. I was way more engaged in the back half than I was in the first half, and I actually come back round to my opinion. This is the second best one so far. And it's based entirely on everything in the back half, and just how well it's filmed. I think that's the key thing here, is the cinematography, how the stunts are filmed. It's got an even better score than I think than any of the previous ones. It was the one thing I complimented in the last one. I think this one has a really good score. That does sometimes make use of the Mission Impossible themes or the little motifs that are in there, but sometimes it just does its own thing, and it's actually really good the way it does it. Because as much as I don't like Lane being, that's the villain from the last movie, like him being back, like the actual moment where they're building up to like what they're going to do to involve him actually was really well done from like an editing and music point of view, because it did this thing where it made it feel like a big deal. I think from that point on is when the movie starts to pick up, and then each sort of segment is better than the last. Once we're in London, that gets better. That said, though, there are things to complain about, and like I will say it, I do not ever, and I'm sure we're going to see it again, but I do not ever want to see something where someone's going to turn out to be a bad guy. I also certainly don't want to see somehow we believe that Ethan might actually be the bad guy. Like,
God, that shoot me.
Yeah, that can just be shot into the goddamn sun to never be recovered. Like, I was groaning so hard, and there's an entire... I would have
been more okay with it if it were like from 3, or if it were from 2. But when that subplot started, I sat and I thought, when was the last time we saw this? It was last movie. It was Alec Baldwin's entire plot. And they're just redoing the exact same plot with 2 different characters, of one convincing and one convincer.
I mean, if I say something nice about it, I would say that at least this time, there's like a plausible. I mean, we can't really talk about till spoilers, but there's a plausible reason why someone. Someone is suggesting to someone else, and there's a reason for it, as opposed to the last movie where Alec Baldwin just basically woke up one day and said, I bet Ethan's lost his mind and he's actually the bad guy. Let's treat him like an enemy of the state. Because that was the reason we got last time. This had at least a slither more than that. Admittedly, not a lot, but a slither more.
I will give this movie full credit in that I think that, barring probably the first one, and maybe the third one, I'd have to really think about it, I think that this is the most cohesive in A to B to C. I think that everything informs on what they do next very cohesively, where it makes absolute sense as to why they're going to each of these different locations, and it does a good job of setting them up as well. It doesn't feel like just randomly they're like, all right, and this next one's going to be in flips coin Budapest, because why not? Like, it feels very clear and logical why they're going to each of these locations.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I think, like I said, the first act for me, it does feel like it hits you with a lot of stuff really quickly. And so they technically have explained what the first big kind of mission's going to be by the time we're sort of airdropping into Paris. But to be honest, it's so much like information so quickly that it's hard to just like all you really remember is White Widow. There's a White Widow. It was we're looking for the White Widow. There's also someone else. There's a Trask or it was not Lark. It was not Lark. Sorry, not Trask.
Lark. Yes.
Lark. There's a Lark. We're going to find a Lark. Okay, all right. Okay, there's a big party going on. All right. It feels like a little overwhelming. I think as the movie goes on, there is like one choice which I will not spoil, and it is the opening dream sequence actually, where I think it foreshadows something too on the nose, because I think there's a moment late in Act 2 where it kind of really comes into it, which I think would have been harder hitting had they not foreshadowed it right at the start of the movie. I think that was a mistake. Especially since I actually think I like how it's included for the rest of the movie from that point on. I'm being very careful with my words here, so shut up and don't say what I'm talking about.
I'll argue about whether or not I think I like whether it's included later on. I think that they either needed to lean more into it or they needed to back off. But I'll agree that I think that opening dream sequence does not do anything for the plot besides just a little note reminder for people who may not have been watching 2 to 3 movies ago.
Yeah. So there's that. I mean, like, it doesn't have quite as much of the team dynamic as 4 did, which is my favorite of the series, but I do think it does kind of come round by the end, and it feels like it, Benji and Luther definitely feel like they're really on board. Elsa's back, and I think she's very separate for a lot of the movie, but by the time we get to Act 3, it feels like, oh no, she's kind of part of the team now, and I kind of like that kind of forming by then.
I'll agree that she's part of the team, but it does kind of feel like they just had to create a reason for her to be there. And I'm willing to accept it as long as the team dynamics works. But for that first appearance, it does feel like, oh, you were kind of done last movie, and yet we're reinventing. Again, it's that thing that I said where it doesn't feel like a continuation from the last movie. It feels like I just don't want to put the toys back in the toy box yet.
I see what you're saying, but I think it's as abrupt as her introduction was in the last movie. I don't think her introductions in either movie feel that natural or smooth. But at least here,
her introduction in the last movie is the first time she ever had to appear. So, like, yes, it was abrupt, but like you have to introduce the character somehow.
Well, yeah, but I'm saying it like I'm saying it felt abrupt though, in like a kind of not good way.
Okay, fair
right?
enough.
Because immediately it becomes like, oh, can we trust her or not? And I never really liked that.
I didn't like her plot. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, but that was the entire thing from the second she was introduced is why is she doing this? What's going on here? Blah 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 blah. This movie, she does kind of appear up out of nowhere, but they try and kind of work it into like give her a motive and like this is why she's doing what she's doing. It's just kind of whatever. What is funny though, I do remember when I first saw this, and I didn't remember this going in, but I remembered it as I was watching it. That when I first saw this movie, I had forgotten all of 5, and like so much of what like she talks about and like her trying to clear her name with MI6 or even just the villain, like I remember like being like, okay, they're talking about this villain like he was in the last movie, so I'm just going to like take their word for it, but I could not remember it, right? I it obviously doesn't help that he's got like a beard in this one, so he looks a bit different, but it's yeah, I had fun memories just looking back and going, oh yeah, I really like this one is probably by far it's the most connected to the previous film of any in the series.
Mm-hmm.
And when I saw it for the first time, I didn't remember any of the fifth one, so it all just kind of I still watched it as a standalone movie almost, and just kind of accepted anytime they told me that something was a big deal, which may have even helped a little bit because I don't like the villain in 5, so maybe the first time I watched this, because I didn't remember 5 that well, when they just said he was a big deal, I'm like, okay, I'll take the word for it. He's a big deal.
I mean, that makes sense. If you don't know anything about the villain going in, it's like, yeah, no, this new guy. Wow, he's so still not menacing. I don't know what I think it's the actor himself. Like last time he was clean shaven, he looked a bit too posh and like it was whatever. This time he's coming around looking like the Unabomber, and I still just don't get this air of menace about him.
To be fair though, I don't think he's meant to be that menacing in this one, or at least it doesn't matter that he's not, because the menace is kind of shifted to someone else. And I think he's more of a plot service character in this movie than he is a character in and of himself, right? He serves a purpose, and that's about it. Not that I particularly, again, liked him being back necessarily, but at least I didn't have to hear him monologue quite as much or try and be intimidating or anything like that. It helped that he was quiet for a lot. Like that helped quite a bit.
I think the benefit from this one over the plan in 5 is that the one in 5 was a lot more nebulous. It was a lot more of there's a general terror plot thing, and like he's looking for this list of names. This one is specifically like, we are doing nukes. We know what the consequences of nukes are, and therefore we are an actual threat. So it's a lot more locked in of we know what's going to happen if the villain succeeds.
Yeah. So yeah, for me, it comes down to a really shoddy first act, but once it kind of gets that out of the way, I think it's a pretty enjoyable action movie with well-shot action set pieces, and that's pretty much what I'm here for. A little bit of team camaraderie also adds a bit to it, but it's really the action set pieces and how they're shot that I'm into it.
Yeah, for me, I'm much bigger on the first act than you are. I will fully admit the period where he's getting the briefing from Alec Baldwin, pretty much that whole sequence up until they're up in the plane, like that I just turned my brain off for. Because again, I just let it wash over me. Whatever the plan is, I'll eventually figure it out. But up until we get to, I would say, probably, again, where the pivot point is, where we're really talking about the Solomon Lane stuff, I think that's kind of like more so I was interested in what we were doing there. And again, I like the action sequences, but I think that the team dynamic stuff kind of takes a backseat, not to, I don't want to say not to like, can we trust them sort of stuff like that, but there is this underlying thing of, obviously Ethan is still being framed for this thing, so how do we get out of that? And it's just, I don't know, it's a little bit messy for me right up until we get to the third act.
I mean, it is. I'll still take that, well, most of it anyway, over most of the first act, right? There's a couple of good little bits in the first act, but everything with going to see Vanessa Kirby, everything even from like the first little mission where things kind of set up the rest of the movie, feels a bit off to me, and I don't know, I don't like a lot of that first act, but luckily for me, as opposed to you, is that ending strong is way more satisfying than starting strong and going downhill. So I think I have a much happier mood by the end of the movie than you seem to, just based on that.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not like I dislike the third act, but I just think that there are several aspects to it where they feel cheap in a lot of ways, where I wanted it to just feel a little stronger.
Now I'm thinking about it, it's the best third act in any of the movies. Now I like Ghost Protocol more. Ghost Protocol is a better movie, but its strengths are not the ending. Its strengths are mostly in the rest of the movie, right? That's something we said when we talked about it. And I'm thinking of the rest of them. None of them have a better third act in this movie. One's third act is probably next up, but I think this one's stronger.
One is the next comparison point for me. I'm trying to remember the third act for 4. How exactly was that one?
They're trying to stop the nuke, and the climax was kind of in the big, like, the fancy car dealership or parking thingy.
Oh, right, that one. Yeah.
Wasn't bad, but it wasn't.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think I would put it. I'm a little bit more of a toss up between 1 and this one, but I would agree that they are. This one is definitely one of the highest ones up there. But that doesn't mean that there can't be some cheap moments to it. I think collectively it's strong, but there are moments to it where I'm like, did we really need to? Is that really something that had to happen here?
Well, I'm curious to hear what you're going to say those moments are when we get to talking about it. But I was just having fun for the most part by the time we got there. I was actually very relieved as I realized in the back half I was enjoying it much more, because I really wasn't feeling the first chunk of it at all. So we kind of mentioned, some of the cast. Henry Cavill here, of course. We were joking about the mustache earlier on. He's a CIA person put on the team to keep an eye on things because Angela Bassett doesn't trust IMF, which is so funny because now Alec Baldwin's running IMF and he's like, sending them off on the mission, and he's like now arguing for IMF because Angela Bassett's literally just got his role from the last movie.
Yeah.
It's such a flip.
It feels a little messy, not in terms of like in the movie, but just if you look at the continuity of like the characters over the course, it's like clearly there should have been a little bit more of a transition. Also, justice for Jeremy Renner. That man needed to be here. Yeah, no,
I was bummed when he wasn't here as well. It just kind of sucks. Who knows? Maybe we'll get lucky. Maybe he'll get a cameo in the last one. That would be nice.
I'd hope so. I want them to bring back everybody.
Oh yeah, I hope we get a scene with everyone coming back, except anyone from 2. They can all piss off.
No, they need to specifically have the movie open with everyone from 2 being killed as like the collateral damage to start with.
So yeah, I mean, I think Cavill is good. He's obviously he's got an action star look to him. Obviously the one famous gif for this movie that everyone brings up, and I was looking for it in the movie, and you can see it, but the moment where he cocks his fist and his beard appears as he does so, why that happened, what weird visual thing went on where that ended up in the movie, I do not know, but it is there. It's a blinking you'll miss it moment, but it is there. Vanessa Kirby's here as someone who's kind of in the criminal underworld that they go and see at some point. I'll leave that just that for now, but I guess she's more known now because she's about to be in Fantastic Four. Like, she's going to be a bigger, well-known star, I think, after this year versus what she has been up until now. But you might know her from something.
I'm looking through her stuff. I haven't particularly seen her, but yeah, I'm sure she'll be a bigger name once she's in the MCU.
Yeah, so that's coming up. But yeah, and there is one person I'm notably leaving out intentionally for spoilies, just in case. But we'll get to it all. So, and we mentioned Rebecca Ferguson obviously back as Ilsa. Hey, they didn't replace the one woman, so that was nice.
They didn't. It took you 6 movies. Congratulations, you did it. I'm happy. Like, that's kind of what we were saying with 4. Is it felt like the team dynamic really got solidified there. It was nice to see almost everybody come back for 5. But that's kind of the sort of continuity I was looking for, is if you really want me to care about the team, you got to carry them through these movies. And having a female, I hesitate to say lead, but she is it by default. Having the female lead be someone who's finally carrying through allows me to connect with her a lot easier than I would be if you tried to reintroduce someone new again.
Yeah. So, that's something. Yeah, Christopher McQuarrie's back directing, of course. He's directed everything from 5 onwards. He's obviously did the 7th one, and he's done the new one that's coming out, because he's Tom Cruise's best friend for some reason these days. Hey, it is what it is.
I swear one day Christopher McQuarrie is going to get like a Best Director Oscar, and he's going to go up on stage and he's just going to take off the Mission Impossible mask, and it turns out it was actually Tom Cruise the whole time.
Tom Cruise has been secretly directing these movies from 5 onwards. Is that what you're saying?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I can see it. So, yeah, as far as anything else goes, I think that's everything we can kind of talk about spoiler-free.
Yeah, I'd say so. You kind of spoke on it and then moved on without me being able to chime in, but
Sure.
I agree in that I really do like the score for this one. It was the first. There was the sequence right before, or technically it's a couple scenes before, but prior to we get into the motorcycle chase, they play a lot with the idea of like silence and the score playing, and they bring in the Mission Impossible theme and a different like key and signature and stuff like that, and it all just it made me really sit down, recognize it, notice it, and it worked very well.
Yeah, and as per usual, really good use of the sound mix and the surround sound and all that stuff. Like, it was a very, very, very good mix.
Yes,
on the movie, which is expected with a big budget blockbuster in general, but combine that with the really good score, it was a very pleasurable audio experience as well. So, all right, so we'll give the spoiler warning. So if you've not seen Mission Impossible Fallout, this is your warning. We're about to just talk about it with open spoilers. I did not remember that his wife shows back up in this movie.
that's crazy to me, because in a prior movie, I think it might have been 3, you told me that the wife was going to come back in. Now, maybe you meant the ending of 4.
I meant 4. Yeah,
that's what you meant? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, fair enough. I was kind of sitting there waiting. I didn't think that was the one you were talking about. I was like, the wife's going to be a major plot player at some point. And to be fair, she isn't really here, but she's at least involved.
I was just remembering the ending of 4 because I'd seen that multiple times and I really liked that one. I did not remember this. What's so funny, though, is that the moment she actually shows up in person in the third act, because up until that point, she was only in dream sequences. She's in like 2 dream sequences, and we see her photograph, but it's not until Act 3 where she's actually there. And it's a really good moment, actually, but it's that sort of thing where my brain remembered it like 10 seconds before it happened, where I'm like, oh, wait, I remember all this now.
Yeah.
And it just kind of kept flooding back to me right in that moment. But yeah, because I saw her name in the opening titles, which I felt a bit weird not mentioning her, but I also feel like if I don't have to talk about it, I'm not going to spoil it, because it feels like such a thing. I don't know.
I mean, they do the thing with the dream sequence early on, which I guess can kind of lead you to believe, like, oh, maybe she'll make one of those tiny little 4-style appearances again, rather than being something that's actually critical to the plot.
But, she's in this dream sequence where it's her and Ethan getting married, and then it turns out that our man Lane, our villain from the last movie's there. And weirdly, he's got his beard in this dream sequence, and that's what he's got in real life for the rest of the movie, but that's not what he had when Ethan knew him in the prior movie. So that's just a weird little, like, oh, you didn't want to, like, make him look like the last movie because it was inconvenient, so he looks like he does in this one.
Well, I don't even think it would be inconvenient. I think it would probably be confusing for audiences, much like you, who didn't remember 5. They'd be like, who's this non-bearded guy who's doing the vows? And then all the rest of the movie, we see the villain with the beard, and we can't connect the two.
I mean, sure. But anyway, so he wakes up, he gets his docket with all this information on it. Turns out the Syndicate have become the Apostles, right? The ones who are left. And I was sitting there thinking, oh no, we're doing more Syndicate stuff with a different name. Oh no. I got very worried.
I'm not opposed to doing more with the Syndicate as long as you actually do something with the Syndicate. That's the whole problem with the last movie, is that they were like, oh, the Syndicate's causing chaos, and you say, what kind of chaos? And then whoever's speaking just turns around and runs away because they don't have an answer.
So anyway, it's like, hey, they're trying to get plutonium because they want nuclear devices, right? So we're dealing with nukes, and
they need 1.21 gigawatts.
Very good.
Talk to the Libyans.
And they've got this scientist who can build them their bombs, blah 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 blah. Ethan go and do stop this at all costs, right. And we sort of just kind of cut to a mission where Ethan and the team being Benji and Luther, are like doing a buy from some guy who has these 3 plutonium cores that he's selling. So they're trying to do a buy for them so that the real bad guys don't end up with them, right? Nice and simple. But the team gets ambushed, they get into a bit of a shootout, and Ethan, and this is the big thematic thing that the movie wants us to think about for the rest of it, is that Ethan makes the choice when Luther's held as a human shield to not let Luther die. He actually shoots Luther knowing that he's got a bulletproof vest on, but he doesn't want to let him die, and as a result, the bad guys get away with plutonium, which obviously everyone afterwards is like, hey, you let really bad people get the core ingredient to a nuclear bomb. Maybe it was worth Luther, dying for that, because how many people are going to die if they get to blow these things up? So it becomes this thing in the movie where it's like, okay, Ethan's the man who cares as much about the one person as he does about the millions, right? He can't just let an innocent person go. And that's something that comes up throughout the movie. There's actually one really good scene that I think brings this up in the Paris section that I actually quite like that scene on its own.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about for sure. Okay, so just going into this, I think that the sequence where he's getting told about the apostles, like via the tape or whatever, first off, it opens weird, where instead of it just being like, oh, here's this tape or whatever, and like you have to just accept whatever it is, they have a weird passphrase system now where he has to like quote some biblical scripture or something in order to get the tape to even begin with, and then he has to give a blood sample. Just seemed a bit weird considering what we've seen before. But what I liked there was in the initial setup, they specifically give the audience, all right, you don't need to know the last movie, just know that there's a group called the Apostles. We've caught a lot of people, but these people are now unknown. We don't know who they are. And they did something in Middle Asia involving a smallpox outbreak, which seems inconsequential, but then comes back in a big way later. And I think that's a good setup, that it kind of just sits in the back of your head a little bit without taking up too much space.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I'm fine with the way that comes back up. I do think that, as per usual with these movies, there's just too much information in this little briefing.
Yeah.
That explains the villains, explains the plan, what you need to do. It's a lot to take in. And they explain that there's kind of a main villain who's orchestrating all this stuff right now, called Lark. And no one knows who he is. There's no photograph. So right away you're like, okay, someone's going to turn out to be Lark then at some point, aren't
they? I bet it's Benji. I never trusted him.
For me though, the second problem with this opening stuff is this little, I don't know, this deal that we're trying to make with these bad guys, and then they get ambushed. The whole thing felt really kind of rushed to me, and it just made the characters look kind of sloppy, where I'm like, they literally have a moment where like, wait a minute, who's got the plutonium if we're all standing over here? And then they run back over and the case is just gone. It's like, you just seem really bad at your jobs right now. Like, I get that because the way everyone talks about this after is that Ethan was faced with an impossible choice. He had to choose the life of a friend, someone that he knows is a good man, and stopping the bad guys from getting plutonium. But all I could actually feel at the end of the scene was like, oh man, you guys really dropped the ball. Like,
see, maybe this is just me, and like, again, I like the actor, I like Simon Pegg, but like, Benji is just the epitome of incompetence to me, and I don't know why he goes on these missions when Luther is around to do just as much tech stuff.
Oh, I can tell you why, because Luther is getting older and fatter, which the movie does point out at one point, where because Benji at one point is like, hey, you're gonna have to wear a mask and pretend to be Elaine. He's like, why do I have to pretend to be Elaine? And then Luther just like, look at me.
I think that was more pointing out the skin tone than the everything else, but yeah, sure.
Oh, come on, the belly as well. Come on.
But I mean, fair. But no, I just for that opening sequence, I know that Tom Cruise takes it on himself. Ethan takes it on himself of like, I let them have the plutonium. But I'm like, no. You were running over to check on Luther. Benji should have stayed by the car. There's no reason he should have run up afterwards. The fact that was taken is entirely on Benji.
Yeah. I mean, either way, it all felt kind of sloppy, just as an excuse to like give the characters, and I get it, like you want this sort of guilt to be in there to sort of help drive that we have to like solve this problem for the rest of the movie. But in a weird way, it kind of feels like a repeat of like in 4 with like, oh, you gave them the real nuclear code, so now you have to fix it. It's kind of just that more stretched out over the whole movie. Like, you gave them the plutonium, so now you have to fix it.
To an extent, I'll agree with you. I think that more so the reason that it feels condensed here is because they wanted to do the next scene where they pretend that the nukes were already made, and it's played to the audience straight of like, oh, here's a news broadcast saying all these religious sites were nuked, and we see that I think it was the guy who made the nukes.
Yeah, it's the scientist.
Or like designed the nukes. Yeah, the scientist. He's in a hospital bed. He was in a car accident or something. Apparently he's been out for 2 weeks. And Luther and Ethan come in and say, like, take a look on the news. That's your doing. You did all that. Now tell us how to unlock your phone so we can track these people.
And they show us news footage where nukes have went off in like 3 religious sites. We're talking about it was Mecca, Jerusalem, and
the Vatican.
Vatican, yes. Of course, the Vatican, once again. IMF failing the Vatican.
I don't know what it's going to be like when this episode goes out, but at the point of filming this, the Pope died like a week and a half ago. And I heard like, oh, the Pope was there at the time. I'm like, ooh, that's bad timing.
Yes, the conclave's assembling. Rafe Fiends try to pick a new Pope. So... Yeah, but they sort of play this straight, and part of me, I didn't really remember this opening, so there was like a minute here where I'm like, wow, did they just open this movie with like, oh, IMF failed and 3 nukes went off, and that's going to be the starting point of this whole thing?
Yeah, I like that. That's creative to me. I like that impact.
Yeah, well, it turns out to be a whole bluff, because they need this guy to unlock his phone, and the guy's like just starts laughing because he's a devout believer in the cause of the apostles, and he's like, unless you read Lark's manifesto on air, I won't unlock shit. So they make a call and they act all serious like they're giving in here. And you see the newscaster start to like say, oh, I've been handed this manifesto. I've been told to read it in full. And he starts reading it. So the scientist starts laughing and says, sure, I'll unlock the phone. Doesn't matter now. And he taps in his password and Luther like hooks into it and gets all the information out of it. And as soon as Luther says, all right, we got everything we needed, the walls all fall down. The newscaster walks over, rips off a mask, and it's Benji. It's all been staged just to make this guy think that everything that he was trying to help do already happened, and it hadn't. Yeah. So, yeah.
It's kind of the same thing that happens at the end of 5, where it feels like it would take longer to set up the theatrical reveal than it would be to just let things... like, if you had Benji walk into the room wearing the mask of the newscaster, we would still get it. But to have all of the walls fall away perfectly in time is just like, you had to set up a release system for that, guys. That seems a bit involved.
Yeah, you didn't necessarily need all of that. You could have just had it be like a real hospital room. But
yeah,
it does kind of add to it, though, that even the sunlight coming through the window was fake. When the wall falls away and you realize it's just a light, you're like, oh...
But that's for the sake of the audience and like the haha got you. That's basically Ethan really just wanted to show like we punked you, like, and we want to show you the extent to which we punked you.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that though. It was a fun reveal, so I'm not mad.
Yeah, no. I ended that scene and I was like, yeah, no, this is great. I picked it. I mean, you pick it up earlier on, like it's not a thing where it's right up to the moment.
You get it kind of as it's playing out. You're sort of realizing, wait a minute, they're tricking him into this. But it felt like an evolution to me to the opening scene from the original movie, where they were doing the whole thing where they're trying to convince the guy to do whatever in the hotel room, and it's all just set up to make him think that he's in this situation where he's murdered someone. It made me think of that. I felt like the exact same trick.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but yeah, so okay, so we got this mission, blah blah. They get enough intel to know that this Lark is meeting with the White Widow, which is Vanessa Kirby's character, in Paris tonight. So they're getting on a plane, and this is when Angela Bassett comes out and says, do not take off in that plane. That's a CIA plane. I decide when that plane takes off. And Alec Baldwin has to argue with her a little bit, and she's basically like, hey, you're taking my man with you. This is Henry Cavill. Look at his mustache. Isn't it glorious? He's coming with you. So he's kind of like put there as like a... I don't know, not a spy. I mean, he is a spy, but...
Yeah, the CIA is played off as the far more, like, tactical strike team, where it's like, we're going to do this by the books and do whatever, whereas Alec Baldwin votes for IMF because it's, like, improvisational in nature, and it's able to get in and out without, like, any major red flags going off. So I see the point of him being there as kind of a CIA freelance, but at the same time, I don't know, it feels like somewhere in the past 2 years, IMF was given a downgrade in terms of like what kind of missions they're allowed to go on. I don't remember them having to really answer to the CIA except for the last movie where it felt like that was dealt with.
Yeah, it feels like once again we're dealing with this idea that someone higher up doesn't trust the IMF, or we have to deal with the idea that the IMF might not exist anymore. Because there's even a bit at the end of this movie where it's like, oh, like, I understand now why Alec Baldwin trusted you. The world needs the IMF. And I'm like, I feel like every movie ends with some character realizing, yeah, the IMF needs to exist. Like, why do we have to, every movie, like, go through the process of it maybe not existing anymore or being outlawed or whatever it is? Like, every time.
Again, the second movie was him totally playing by the rules in the book and acting totally within his capacity, and nobody liked that, so we're never going to do it again.
But that wasn't the problem.
I know, but that's what they learned.
I don't think they learned that. I think this is purely happenstance. They just keep going back to the exact same tropes over and over again, and it's so frustrating.
Yeah.
So, but he's there to babysit them, right? And there's like, oh, okay, can we trust them? But at least with the can we trust Henry Cavill stuff, it's like, no, he's clearly an outsider who's here, and there's tension with him the entire time. So it doesn't feel like it's doing the same thing to begin with. You know, it doesn't just feel like we're doing, oh, he's going to turn out to be the bad guy. No, he does turn out to be the bad guy, actually, later on in the movie. But in this part of the movie, it doesn't feel like we're just doing the same thing again. Like, his presence as this outsider who doesn't really like IMF feels like a different new thing that the movies have not really done before, right? It feels different. So, you know, we get this insane sequence though, and this was the one of two sequences that went to IMAX mode.
Yes.
Was the skydiving out of the plane, where there's a bit of dick measuring going on, where Henry Cavill doesn't know how to work the oxygen on his thing, his mask, his breather, but then he gets knocked out when they're going through the lightning storm, and he's like, oh, what, you want to jump through the storm, Tom Cruise, you pussy? And he leaps out.
They literally do the timing of, what are you, afraid of lightning? Zap. Like, it's a comedy cut at that point.
But to be fair, though, some of this is shot very well. Now, obviously, them going through the lightning storm is obviously a decent amount of effects, right? But the way it kind of shows you, like, because Henry Cavill kind of, like, pulls out his, like, the tube on his mask so that Tom Cruise has to fix it before he can jump. And they kind of do like a bit of a wonder here where it kind of follows him back up the plane as he's trying to fix it, and then he jumps out, the camera follows him out. It's very kinetic. It's definitely the first thing in the movie that I really enjoyed, was just this sequence of the jump. Now, does it need to be this ridiculous set piece to just get to the location? Probably not. It doesn't need to be, but hey,
no.
Who cares? It's we're here for the spectacle, so it's just kind of a fun shot, fun sequence.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I in terms of the big one that everyone talks about, this is the one that's on the poster and all that. I think that it is a solid enough stunt. I think that it is, again, it's kind of framed as a oneer. Obviously, there are cuts in between, and there's a lot of visual effects added, but it's framed in that sort of way to give this constant countdown to it, because you have little heads-up display audio giving you altitudes that you need to pay attention to, and it's getting more and more frequent as you get closer and closer to the ground. So I think it does a good job of setting the tone. My only critique with it is, once it's all said and done, once the stunt is finished, like, Henry Cavill just kind of walks, because he gets knocked out. He just walks up after everything's done. It's just like, thanks for or he doesn't even say thanks. He just says, looks like you lost your oxygen. And then, like, that's it. That's the whole sequence. I kind of wanted there to be some sort of, forgive the pun, fallout from that sequence.
Yeah, given who Henry Cavill turns out to be later, maybe having him feeling a little conflicted that Ethan saved his life might be an interesting thing to play on. But yeah, they just kind of shrug it off like, which is kind of what makes it feel like it didn't really matter that they did this big skydiving sequence. It was irrelevant to anything that came after. Right. But it was fun. It looked good. So,
yeah. I mean, I'm viewing it the same way as the plane takeoff sequence from the last one, where it doesn't matter. It's not connected, but we're doing it.
Yeah, but that is separate though in like a cold open, whereas this is actually pretending to be part of the plot. It just doesn't actually have to be here. And to be fair, I think when they're getting into the party and they're looking for Lark and they're tracking him via his, like, because they've all, like, everyone at this party's got like a bracelet with a tag on it. So they're tracking that, and they get to the bathroom, and it's a really big bathroom that's got like almost like it's got like 2 lanes almost, because there's like sinks in the middle facing both sides, and those mirrors kind of creating a wall in the middle. And the reason why I'm pointing that out, because at one point someone gets thrown through that mirror, and it's a glorious moment of debris that I really enjoyed.
It is perfectly designed as the stuntman's bathroom.
Yes.
Like, we have a little obstacle in the middle we can interact with, but for the most part, everything else is off the edges, so we can have nice little fight scenes in between. Yeah,
and there's a lot of nice build-up as they're kind of like, they realize they've got their man, and they're both like on either side of where the sinks are, and they're kind of creeping out, and Ethan's about to come out and like knock him out with the trank, but someone else like pops into the urinal, and they're like, oh no, we have to like stall for a little bit. And then by this point, Lark realizes he's being watched, so he tries to fight back, and we get, you know, the whole fight sequence. And there's even like a weird comedy bit where they do kind of knock him out for a bit, and they get him in the cubicle, right? And by this point, Henry Cavill improvised and hit him with the briefcase. Now, the briefcase is the fancy like face scanning, mask making stuff, because the whole idea here is that Tom Cruise is going to pretend to be this Lark guy and go and speak to Vanessa Kirby's character. But it's not working very well, and whilst they're doing this and they're hiding in the bathroom, some other guys come into the bathroom and they notice there's a bunch of feet in the cubicle, so they all start basically catcalling and making like jokes about being gay, and say, oh, can we join in? Don't be shy. And it's like a little bit, but this gives Lark, or the man who might be Lark at the very least, a chance to wake up, and turns out he's actually a pretty good fighter. So we get a pretty extended fight sequence where they're throwing each other through mirrors, bits of tiles are coming off the wall. It's full on, and this is where, of course, Henry Cavill cocks his fists like they're ammunition. So yes,
they are registered as lethal weapons. I just read on trivia that apparently the guy who plays quote-unquote Lark is, or was, the stunt double in Edge of Tomorrow / Live Die Repeat for Emily Blunt.
Okay.
I don't see the visual resemblance between the two, but good on him.
Well, you throw a wig on, I suppose. I think the big thing, though, in that movie is they're wearing big, chunky suits. So the body aspect of it would be, like, you wouldn't see it, right? They're all in these big sort of, well, not quite mech, but they're like exoskeleton suits. So you wouldn't see the body parts all that much.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it was, I mean, I never noticed, so I'm sure it worked out fine, but it's just weird to see that that's the guy, that's the same guy. It feels a bit strange that he would be there.
I mean, yes, he is an Asian man, so I mean, there's a distinct difference between him and Emily Blunt. That's fair to say.
Must be the same height.
Very possibly.
Yeah, so they continue this fight scene until it looks like Ethan might actually be killed here, and then all of a sudden, Lark gets shot, and it turns out that Ilsa showed up because she's involved in this too.
Yeah, she's standing there. It's a whole moment, and Henry Cavill pops his head out of the corner with his hands up, and he's like, hey, don't shoot me. And there's a bit of confusion here. It's like, okay, why are you here? What's going on? And to be honest, I can't even be bothered trying to like remember like how little she says here and when we find out. Basically,
it's literally nothing. Yeah.
It turns out the MI6 they want Lane dead, and they know this is going to lead to Lane. So because he used to be MI6 and he knows too much about everything that they helped set up with the syndicate, and they want him dead. And this will prove her loyalty, which made me laugh because her whole thing in the last movie was constantly being told she had to prove her loyalty to Lane. Right. So now she's proven her loyalty to MI6, and I thought that was a little bit funny. Not in a good way, just in like a, okay, we're still doing that. Yeah. All right.
But that was my critique with her character. You don't end up learning this until maybe like, another half an hour, 45 minutes into the movie. But it's such an ass pull for me of the entire last movie is this thing where she's told by MI6, because remember, her handler was dirty as well because the exact same reasons. Lane knows too much about how it was made, so he needs to be taken out beforehand. And then we can't even be bothered to give her a new motivation here. It's the same exact motivation, but now it's played of, oh, well, because he was caught in whatever country. He's been extradited around, but Britain really wants him because he has state secrets. So we need to get him back to Britain. That's the big deal here. And it's like, that's flimsy at best, but if you need to be in the plot, whatever.
It's so funny the way you phrased that. He was caught in whatever country. So, he was caught in London. He technically.
Was that where they ended the last movie?
That's where they ended the last movie.
So then how the hell did he end up in a different country?
Because it was the Americans that caught him. And they shipped him out all secret, like. Sure. I don't know.
Whatever. It just felt so sloppy to me when they said that, because there's a much easier solution here of, Lane better than anyone else. We need your input, and just have her on the team from that. You don't need it to be this extra stuff, but they have to do a whole bit during the motorcycle scene where she's seemingly on the opposite side.
Yeah. Her inclusion in the motorbike stuff, I didn't need as much, but they do it. Actually, so I like the bathroom fight scene. I like the skydiving. And those are the two things that I quite like in the first act. Everything else I'm a bit on. And part of what I'm on about, one is because all the intrigue with the White Widow, right? Vanessa Kirby's character, she's doing that. I'm kind of villainous, but I'm kind of intrigued by you. And she thinks Tom Cruise is Lark, right? Because Lark has to pull a Ghost Protocol and say, well, I can't have a mask. I just have to hope she doesn't know what he looks like. Because we don't know what he looks like either, so I guess it might work. The one interesting thing they set up here, which I thought could have been like a bigger set piece, is Elsa's like, hey, you can't pretend to be him. And he's like, why? Because lots of bad people know that he's meeting her, and they're going to try and kill him. So if they think you're him, then they're all going to try and assassinate you. And I thought, oh, that's a cool setup. I'm actually really intrigued by what they might do with this. And it basically just amounts to him like beating up a few people like in the next scene. And that's kind of all.
You know what it is? It's that sequence from Inception. The hotel, the turning the dreamer against his own like security force thing. It's that exact same sort of idea where it's like, oh, all of these people are after quote unquote me, but I'm going to convince you that they're after you instead, and that will get you onto my side.
Yeah. And so the White Widow was like a broker. She just kind of makes deals and sets buyers up with sellers, and that's all she kind of does. Okay,
so here's one thing I don't get. During the opening sequence, Ethan is called up on the phone after the whole deal goes south by the Apostles. They introduce themselves as such.
Yep.
And they say, hey, we're now involved here. We're going to take the plutonium. And they get it. How does it get into the White Widow's hands? Because the whole thing is she has it and the Apostles want it. So where did that change happen?
Yeah, I don't have an answer for that. And it's one of those things that I think makes Act 1 feel very messy. Because if you just didn't have, if you just said that unmarked or unknown people stole the plutonium and we didn't know, but the fact that they did that phone call where they said, hey, the Apostles say hi, it's like, okay, so the Apostles did this, but then like everything else after that scene tells us the Apostles did not steal the plutonium because they don't have it yet.
Right. And I'm putting that less on the opening sequence than I am on this scene, this whole, because I don't think this broker character does enough interesting items in this plot to make her a character. Like, she doesn't feel necessary here. I think that we could have just as easily done all of this with like direct phone calls with the Apostles between the two characters. Having her here is just kind of a nothing.
I kind of agree and I kind of don't. I agree in the sense that I don't think, I think her character really doesn't need to be here. It's kind of a nothing role, to be honest. They just wanted someone else to be kind of menacing and sexy, and that's kind of it.
Yeah.
But I will say, though, I disagree on you said that you're putting the blame more on this part and not the opening. I'm still going to put the blame on the opening because, one, you take out that phone call and it all kind of works. But two, because even if they take out the Vanessa Kirby character inclusion in it, the whole thing about like her having the plutonium for the sellers, the buyers, whoever, but they want Lane, right? They want Lane to be freed, right? He's going to be transported in Paris, and they want to free him. They want someone to break him out. That's the price of getting the plutonium, not money. It's like, no, you give his lane, you get the plutonium. So it's like, okay, that to me says that's the important plot point of this plutonium being the bargaining chip. Now, admittedly, who exactly are the and I guess it's, I mean, we kind of find out that it's really the Apostles who want Lane in the first place, and they were never going to give the plutonium over, which makes the whole thing a bit more convoluted. And at that point, I'm just not even going to try and think about it. But
right,
but
that's just double crossing on double crossing.
Yeah.
Like, that's the plan can be quoted to say, we'll trade you this for this, but neither side was ever going to give up what they have.
Yeah, all the build up to this and like the discussing of like what the fact that they want Lane and that's what he has to do, all of that. I really was not feeling at all.
I agree with you. This is kind of where I dropped off. Like, this is the moment where I was like, okay, from here on, I'm a little bit more because it's just not keeping my attention up until motorcycle chase scene.
Yeah. Well, for me though, it kind of like where it starts to pick up is when it actually builds up to the kidnapping, I suppose, of Lane, or if you want, the breakout of Lane, maybe, right? It's the editing and the build up to like him arriving in the helicopter, being put in the truck, and just like the actual like well done practical stunts of like seeing the truck get hit into the water and them getting him out the water and all that stuff. Like, that stuff was really good, and the motorbike chase stuff was really well done. And when I say it's well done, all I really mean is no, there's shots of Tom Cruise really on a motorbike, and they're nice long shots where you can see him like, you know, siding one way or the other, getting really close to the ground, things like that. He drives past the Arc de Triomphe at one point, and I'm like, man, I mean, it's not as good as the John Wick scene, but it's like it's fun seeing him be chased past
what
it.
I thought.
Yeah.
And the moment they did that circle around the Arc de Triomphe, I was like, and all I can picture is a man in a suit causing even worse traffic.
Yeah, that said though, I know John Wick 4 didn't actually shoot there. I don't know if this one did. It wouldn't surprise me to find out that they didn't. Like, maybe again they just sort of faked the background kind of thing.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me, but it looks good enough. Like, it looks like it worked, so good on him.
That's the thing, when you watch Fist of Fury, the Bruce Lee movie from 1972, and they drive past it, you know they're really driving past it because they did not have the technology to fake it. So it's just, they're just really there.
You know they're driving past it because it feels like a guerrilla shot. You know they didn't have the permits to shoot there.
Well, that's the beauty of it. It's not an action scene. They're just driving in normal traffic, so they can just film that. And hey, look at the production value. That's well, actually, it wasn't the Arc, sorry, it was the Coliseum in this case. The reason why I'm mixing it up
that's right,
is because it's a very similar thing where there's a big roundabout around it, and that's what I was thinking of, because you see them driving around the Coliseum, just like he drives around the Arc in this one. But yes, different country. My apologies.
I had the same mental image, though. It was just not connecting. So one thing I do want to point out is you were talking about the lead up to all of the Solomon Lane, like getting knocked in the river stuff.
Do you want to talk about the fake one that's not actually happening?
Yes, because that one I think is where the score and the way they shot the scene just really worked for me.
Yeah.
And even if it shows that it's a fake one afterwards, kind of pulls its punch a little bit, I think that they have an entire sequence here that basically shows Tom Cruise is part of the actual running and gunning side of things. He's wearing a mask, he's got a big rifle, and they bombard these cops that are transporting Lane and start shooting at them.
The context of this is that Vanessa Kirby's brother is like saying what his plan is to do the breakout. And it's basically just kill all the cops, right? So it's just, you know, kill people left and right. And the whole thing builds up to Tom Cruise being faced with having to shoot some innocent person in the face. And then it cuts to be like, that's your plan? And it's like, we're not doing that. And obviously then Cruise and co start forming their own safer plan.
Yeah. It's not that he's like, we're not doing that. He tells them like, yeah, of course, I'm John Lark. I kill women and children. That's what I do. But then he turns around to his team and it's just like, yeah, we got to find another way here, guys. This is going to be too much for me. But no, the editing and the way that they make that sequence entirely quiet, except for the score, just really sells the moment of how little he wants to do that. Like how that is his line in the sand. But it doesn't ever tell us as the audience that he has a different plan. The way that they play it is that he is just hating the fact that he's having to go into this and he's looking for any other way out. But we don't have the context that he has another way out by the time we get into it.
Yeah. And then even the build up to the actual thing, though, where it's like, okay, no, we're actually on the way, the bad guy's arriving, Lane's getting into the truck. Like, I think that build up is also really good. Like, the music that plays, it does make it feel like a big deal. It almost tricks you into thinking this guy actually is important. He's not, but the illusion is there at this point.
He's so close. I think I honestly believe this may have just been a casting issue. Nothing against the actor himself, but I just do not get this air of intensity or menace from him. I have pictured Philip Seymour Hoffman's villain in his role instead, and obviously there are numerous reasons why that wouldn't work, but if he were in there, I think that's the kind of villain that would work here, that would have that sort of gravitas to him.
So the whole thing here is that eventually Cruz is running from the police. Cavill was on a bike as well, but Cruz is getting from the police. He goes past the arc and he ends up on foot. He actually, like, he kind of looks over his shoulder and gets hit by a car. He basically just runs into a car and then has to, like, finish on foot. But he basically gets into the underwater tunnels under Paris, and Benji and what's his face, Luther are there with a little boat prepared for him, and they've got Lane with a sack over his head the whole time, so he doesn't know whatever. However, when he's in a car with Ethan at one point, and Elsa shoots at him, and he has to take the mask off. Like, eventually he does see it's Ethan, and he's just kind of like, this is interesting.
he just looks at Ethan and he's like, hey, wait a minute, that was Ilsa. And he's like, yeah, I know, shut up. And he's like, oh, and it's Ethan. Wow. All right. Not quite sure what's going on here. This is surprising.
A bit more Odd Couple stuff might have actually went a long way. It wouldn't have made him a better villain, but if they at least sort of played it as Ethan's just sick of his shit and just keeps putting them down, I might have enjoyed that for the comedy value of it.
Yeah, if they stuck to the Odd Couple stuff, I think that would have worked. The last thing I want is what they ended up doing for, like, pretty much the last time they spoke, which was, oh, Ethan, your world is going to crumble and blah, blah, blah. Just shut up, man. We weren't here for that in 5. We're not here for this in 6.
Yeah, I don't think this is much of a problem here, because ultimately, like again, he monologues a little bit, but he's not, like, in the same position he was last time, and I don't even think Ethan's ever, like, scared of him the same way he was supposed to be in 5. It always kind of feels like, okay, he's at it again. You know, Uncle Jeff's doing his manifesto. Like, you know, actually, do you know who should be in this movie as the villain? This should be played by Neil Breen. 10 points added to the score immediately if this character Lane is played by Neil Breen.
God, the editor in me just wants to recut it so badly. Everything in my body's saying, like, now, Ethan, I'm a world-class hacker, and you can't possibly... Like, I want that.
I'm just imagining the scene that comes up just a little bit later now, when they're in, like, the underground bit in London, and Alec Baldwin's debating with them about, okay, this looks bad, Ethan, this is what we're doing here, and Ethan's like, no, we have to do this so we can stop the bad guys. I'm just imagining Neil Breen sitting there, you know, straitjacket tied up to the chair, just yelling, isn't that corrupt? Isn't that corrupt?
Just over and over. Isn't that illegal? Isn't that corrupt?
Oh, jeez.
And somehow, he would still, while he's tied to the chair, end up breaking 3 laptops.
Yes. If you don't know who we're talking about, and I realize we might be alienating some people with this conversation of Neil Breen, he's a really bad filmmaker who also acts in all of his movies. If you want more information on his stuff, you can check out our bonus show that we do on Patreon called Extra Reels, where we have now reviewed 4 of his films. Oh, which, by the way, David.
No, I don't like by the ways. By the ways always mean bad things.
Neil Breen put out a message to his fans in the last couple of days. Tim sent me it. He says his biggest production ever is now underway. His 7th feature film is happening.
Great. Love it.
Isn't that a
wait
threat?
To watch it. Anyway. It is. It's just like everything else he does. It's a threat to most people he's talking about.
Right. So anyway, around this part of the movie, maybe just before the getting the bad guy, maybe just after, it doesn't really matter. But there's a scene here where Henry Cavill goes to Angela Bassett and says, hey, none of us know who this Lark guy is, and wouldn't it be perfect if Ethan was Lark? Wouldn't it just make sense that he was orchestrating all this and he's just assumed his own alias by pretending to be Lark? Doesn't that make sense? And I'm like, now thankfully it ends up not being that much of the movie. Like, other than the one scene with Alec Baldwin, which in and of itself turns out to be a bit of a ruse to accomplish something, which by the way, the ruse that leads to them revealing that Henry Cavill is just a bad guy and he is the Lark. Not just Lark, he is the Lark. Like, that moment where you realize and he realizes he's being duped is such a relief, because like the 5-10 minutes leading up to it, I don't like that much, but in hindsight I don't hate it, because I'm like, oh no, they're playing him, it's fine, okay. They were already ahead of it, we don't have to go through them figuring this out, they've already done it. That was such a nice feeling, that we're not doing this, anyone's believing that Ethan's actually the bad guy, because F that plot so much.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like, that's the initial scene where Henry Cavill's talking to Angela Bassett. All I can think, because you could literally ask my fiance. I practically paused the movie, turned to her and said, "We just did this. We just did this plot. Like, this is exactly the same thing from the fifth one." The only thing that I'll give it a little bit of credit for is that it's trying to tie together continuity-wise, and he basically uses the justification of like, look, I don't think he's evil, but like, how many times has the government disavowed and ruined the life of Ethan Hunt? I think he has a bone to pick regardless. And I'm like, that would make sense. At the very least, like, if he didn't want to be an IMF agent anymore, it would make sense that he could absolutely ruin lives. It doesn't make sense from the characters we know him, but for a CIA agent who's not that familiar with him, yeah, I could see that argument being made and making sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of weird to use the sloppy, repetitive writing as a motivation for something, but technically, I can't argue with it. But it floats that idea. So when they get to London with the bad guy, with Lane, that is, and he's tied up and whatnot, they take out his tracker chip. We find out later that they also put their own tracker chip in him, but whatever. Alec Baldwin's there, and he's like, "Oh, you're here." Actually, I'm skipping over something I want to talk about, actually. So before they leave Paris, there's a scene, which is played for comedy at first, actually, where after they're all together, the team, and they've got Lane, and they're putting him in a car, they open the door to the garage, and this police lady, this French police lady, just sort of sees them, and this guy's got like a sack over his head, and she's just kind of like, and everyone just kind of freezes and doesn't know what to do, because they've just kind of been caught in a very suspicious looking situation. And this woman like pulls out her gun and says freeze, and Ethan Hunt, bless him, just tries to walk up to her calmly with his hands up and says, just walk away. Like, say, this is important, please, just walk away. Yeah. And it's a whole thing, and you're like, how is he going to solve this? And it's kind of feeding into the core theme of the movie, which is, the idea that he doesn't want to hurt someone that doesn't deserve it, right? Like, he'll go out of his way to save her. And he's trying to talk her down, and out of nowhere there's a gunshot. And I didn't remember like this how this played out, so part of me was thinking, oh, it's going to cut over to Henry Cavill, and Henry Cavill's done this because he's like, any means necessary type guy. They
specifically show him unholstering his gun throughout all of this. Like, he's ready to take the shot if he needs to.
But it's actually some cronies who work for the White Widow's brother, right? And they just sort of come up and like, hey, so-and-so wants to talk to you, blah, 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 blah. And Ethan's sort of looking over at this woman who's like sort of lying there holding her stomach. She's clearly in, a lot of pain. She needs medical assistance. And the bad guys are like, oh, finish her off. And like he goes over to shoot her. And then Ethan just has to make a judgment call where he pulls out his gun and kills all four of these bad guys, which is improvising, is going to look suspicious. How are they going to explain this? And then they get into like an action chase, so it's whatever. But I do appreciate this, because I'm like, you know what? Not that he's not proven things over the course of the last like 5 movies, but as far as this movie is concerned, this unquestionably is like, okay, you made me like him again. Not that I was like hating him before, but you just gave me a reason to root for this son of a bitch, because like him going out of his way, the way he goes over to her and sort of presses his hand on the wound and says, here, call in for help. You're going to be okay. I'm so sorry. Is like, you know what? I want to root for you. Well done, movie. This was a good little scene on its own. that sold me on the character's like morals. So
yeah, it's an absolutely nothing moment in terms of the plot because it doesn't come back. It's not a thing where like even the killing of the goons is very easily explained away as to like why Ethan was able to get away with it in the broker's eyes. But we like it's basically the Superman saving the cat sort of thing where it's just there's a cat in the tree and Superman, he can absolutely save the world, but it's his focus on these tiny little things that make you like him as a person rather than a hero.
Yeah. So, you know, the whole thing afterwards is the broker says, oh, we also want Elsa. Like, the buyer wants Elsa now. Now, we find out later, and this is part of what makes the broker stuff even more convoluted, is that the broker is actually working for the CIA. She's like doing... Like, she's shady. She's not like an agent, but she's working as like an inside person for the CIA, so the CIA can keep track of, like, bad people who are buying and selling really bad things.
Is that what that was?
I think that's what
that's
they said.
Not the way I read. What I was reading it as, because they said like, oh, we're going to use this broker in order to get him back to Britain to continue with something or whatever. No, something else.
That was at the end. They say that they're using a broker. Earlier on in the movie, they explain that she's already working for them. Like that was not new information at the end. No.
Okay.
They said already earlier on that she's already working for the CIA. So
fair enough. I took her as kind of a true neutral. I took her as like, look, right, wrong, I'm not really playing any sides here, but whatever side wants something done, I'm going to take my cut. Like, that's kind of the way I got her figured out, but if they specifically said that she's working for CIA, then so be it.
Or at the very least, I mean, I suppose it might be the case where she doesn't know she's working for the CIA, but she's actually always been fed, like, her jobs. Like maybe she doesn't know the CIA is the buyer. Maybe the CIA are pretending to be, someone else.
Right.
We're the FBI. Like that. But,
Please don't look into it. We're just not the CIA. We're just FBI.
But, I mean, so maybe that's the thing. Maybe she doesn't know she's, like, working for a US agency, but they definitely explained earlier on that they already use her, and that the entire mission for Lane was something that they already kind of set up or something. I don't know.
Okay. No, I mean, that's I just missed that line of dialogue then. That would be entirely separate. But yeah, no, to point out the reason why they want Ilsa, though, is that she has found out / rationalized that the person who killed her goons, where it was actually Ethan, was Ilsa. So they want her as part of the deal because otherwise, she's been slighted. These were my men. I have to take her out now.
Yeah, but that's not the real reason, because Angela Bassett says later that the broker threw in Elsa for free on top of like whatever else they were offering the CIA. So I think she must know she's working for the CIA, because she's straight up saying, hey, do you want Elsa too? We'll give her to you.
Yeah, I guess.
So I think she is still like, she's still black market. She's still like working for herself, but she's happy to get paid by the CIA. I think that's the way it works. It's that, it's not like she's she's not on the payroll. She's just doing bad things, but for a government agency. Anyway,
yeah, that's what I'm saying. She's true neutral. Like she doesn't care if it's good or bad. She's just doing whatever people are paying her to do.
Yeah, I find the whole thing just a big convoluted. I don't care.
No, I hate the character in this plot because it feels like they were trying to lean on this idea of, oh, it's this third party that like we can't predict the interests of, or is going to be some obstacle.
She does not matter in the third act at all. Like it does not like she's mentioned briefly at the end for like helping get Lane back to MI6 as like she's a courier for that, but she like after the halfway point in the movie, her entire character and her brother do not matter. They're gone. And it's...
during the middle of that sequence where it's, Alec Baldwin saying, hey, you're Ethan, you're on the run now. Everything is rogue, blah, blah, blah. They specifically run out to say, we can catch the widow. We can still make this deal. But that is the last time she's like even mentioned, because it turns out that was all a ruse and we don't make the deal. So she doesn't have anything else to do. It's just entirely on the Apostle group and our IMF team.
Yeah, because they're preparing to go make this deal with Simon Pegg pretending to be Lane, and Lane's here, and they give Henry Cavill the job of babysitting the real Lane. But as soon as they all leave, Lane like shuts down the computers, goes in, takes the camera down, uncuffs Lane and says, "Hey, all right, I've got a helicopter in the rendezvous point. Let's go." And Lane's like, "No, I'm not leaving. I'm not done with Hunt." And he's like, "God damn it, no, it's time to move. Like, I didn't do all this for whatever." And he gets him to say a few things that are very incriminating, right? It's very clear who Henry Cavill actually is. He's actually a lark. And then there's a moment where he calls back to an earlier line when they were basically making fun of the IMF and saying, "Oh, the IMF are a bunch of children who play with masks." And he sort of repeats that line. He's like, "Oh, God damn it, the IMF, they're such children who play with..." And he looks at him and goes, "Masks." And he sort of realizes that he's probably being duped. And sure enough, Lane stands up, rips the mask off. It's Benji. They made a switch, and they've got him on camera, being broadcast to Angela Bassett and whoever else who needs to see it, that he is the bad guy.
I will freely admit, as much as I predicted, like the hospital room setup scene, this one I didn't get until like pretty much as Henry Cavill was saying it. Like as he was saying the children with mask line, I'm like, oh, they did the thing. Okay. All right, cool.
Yeah, and it's why that hospital one earlier on is a good scene, because it's a really good way to set this one up without it like spelling it out. Because you sort of like, okay, you establish that they can trick people, and then here you do it in a way where it's like, hey, this guy, like, if anything, this is because this is a reveal to us as well. As soon as he starts doing all this stuff, even if we were suspecting something, this is the first time the movie shows him outright. Just no, he is the villain. Like up until this point, it was like, oh, maybe there's a couple of little hints, but this is like, no, he's actually just straight up doing the villainous stuff now. So.
Yeah, I think from an audience perspective, for people who have enough meta commentary experience, the moment that he's talking to Angela Bassett and saying like, "What if Ethan is actually a bad guy?" I'm like, "You're the bad guy."
Oh yeah.
Okay, yeah. Let's just move on from that one quickly.
Yeah, and we know we're looking for a man named Lark. There's only one character, unless they pull something crazy where it's either Luther or Benji. There's only one person in this movie it could be that means anything, and that is you.
Yep.
So.
Yep, introduce a new character, make him the villain. The only way it could have gone otherwise is if it was friggin' Jeremy Renner, just out of the blue.
So basically, Angela Bassett though is still like, I still don't trust IMF though. So I've told a SWAT team to come in and arrest all of you and bring you all home so we can, wrestle this out in meetings and briefings and whatnot. And so there's a bit of a standoff. However, though, turns out the bad guys have got a couple of moles in the SWAT team, because two of them just turn around and start shooting the other SWAT team members. So we get a big shootout in the dark. It's a whole thing. But really, the interesting part is what it leads to, which is Henry Cavill got a tracker device put in him when they first tried to nab him. And then Benji intentionally says to Ethan, "Hey, come here." And he implants a little tracker in him so that Benji can track both him and Henry Cavill. So we get this big chase sequence where...
Just pause. The other big thing continuity-wise is Alec Baldwin is killed.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's how little I cared about it, is that it didn't even feel worth mentioning. Or like, see when that happened, I was like, oh, I don't remember he died in this movie. Okay, I guess that happened. Because I remembered at one point in the last one going, I think he's back in the next one, but I don't think he's back in 7. And then, no shit, why he's not back in 7.
He better be a Force ghost, god damn it. I need him to tell us how cool Ethan is.
Well, I don't think he's going to be doing too
many
major roles.
He is destiny. He is coming down upon us.
Alec Baldwin's acting career is in a bit of a precarious place at the moment.
That's true, yeah.
So I don't think we're going to be seeing him. But, there's a whole thing where he dies and whatever. So it becomes this chase sequence where Henry Cavill isn't even aware he's being chased, because he's just sort of walking to wherever his rendezvous point is. Ethan is like trying to follow the tracking advice from Benji, and we get some of that team dynamic where Ethan, because of where he ends up going like up top somewhere, and he ends up sort of on the upper floor. So the joke becomes is that Benji's saying, "Hey, turn left," but Ethan's actually on a rooftop, so turning left is actually quite difficult. Probably the bigger moment of this is when he ends up in the middle of an office building and he's like told to turn left, and it's like, oh shit, yeah, I can go across that roof of that walkway, but he has to like borrow an office chair and break the window first to get out.
All right. Yeah, I like the moment. I like the chase. It's him. It's Tom Cruise running. It's literally how he built his name.
It's Tom Cruise running very fast, including through a big funeral in a giant abbey.
Yes. So I am okay with the sequence. But again, God, why is Benji here? Like, I understand he's the guy who's giving directions, but all in, and specifically that office sequence is what pisses me off. It's simultaneously he says, you got to turn right. And Tom Cruise looks out the window and it's like, right is nothing. What do you mean turn right? And he goes, oh, sorry, I had the screen lock on. I didn't have rotation lock on or whatever. So he's, oops, incompetent. And then he immediately follows up with, as Tom Cruise is about to jump down out of this office building, he says, oh, I'm going to have to jump. And Benji's like, oh, sorry, I had 2D mode on as well. I didn't realize you were up higher. That's in 30 seconds where he's just double whammy of incompetence in terms of the one thing he has to do.
Yeah, I'm not bothered by this. You've got a real hate on for Benji. It doesn't bother me.
Honestly, I think I would be 100, because I just watched a clip today. I don't know what Bond movie it's from. It just showed up in my shorts feed. But it's Q doing the exact same thing. He's just giving directions, but he's the man behind the computer. He's not in the field. If they just kept Benji as the man behind the computer and not a field agent, I would be totally fine with it. But it's the idea that he passed the tests that Ethan had to pass and is in that same sort of tier. That's the problem I have with it.
I just do not care.
All right.
He's been in the field for 3 movies now. You're still whining about it. I do not give a shit.
Yeah, I am.
He adds a bit of color. He adds a bit of a different dimension. He's kind of likable. I don't know. I have no problems.
Don't get me wrong. I like him as a character whenever he's not like working on something. When he's talking to the team, I get why they want him around. He's a nice guy. He's good to have around. But it feels like every time he touches anything, it makes it worse.
I have zero problem. The only problem I have with this is that if this is GPS, you can't tell height from that. So the idea that you'd be able to see the height in 3D mode doesn't make any sense.
What was that? Was that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles?
I think it was the second Michael Bay one.
The second one? Yeah. Had that same thing.
They're on the 32nd floor. You wouldn't be able to tell that, but okay. I have no problems with that. I think it's a fun sequence. Right. It's again, it's one of those things that this franchise does where it's like we're in the real location, we're doing a lot of running across these rooftops, and you see London, landmarks is the word I'm looking for, like sort of in the background, whether it's the eye or whatever. I'm sure you see Parliament at one point. I do think it's funny now. This is the 3rd movie where we're back in London. That's 2 in a row, bizarrely. Doesn't end in London this time, but we're back in London, and I think we go to London at least one more time. So they love London for some reason.
Yeah, London's just a haven for terrorists, I guess. That's what we're getting at here.
I don't know. Maybe there's some nice tax incentives for shooting in England. So
I'm sure.
Yeah, they always go. We'll do an act in London just to save some money.
They're going to run out of money halfway through. I mean, obviously not because they filmed it already, but they get halfway through Dead Reckoning Part 7, and it's like
Part 7
or Part 8. Sorry, Part 8.
Part 8.
Dead Reckoning Part 2. Mission Impossible number 8. God damn this numbering system. They get through that, and they're just like, oh no, we have to set our final act in Vancouver. Oh, the yummy tax breaks that Vancouver will give.
Yeah, but I bet they'll do some exciting things in Vancouver that no TV show will ever done before.
I don't know. The CW's exhausted a lot of options out of that.
Not with IMAX cameras.
No, that's true.
So, fun chase sequence, and he gets to Henry Cavill as Henry Cavill's going up this elevator, and he just grabs onto the bottom of it, and he looks up, and Henry Cavill's looking down at him, just kind of like bemused, and pulls out his gun. And it's a bit of tension, but then he puts his gun away, and Tom Cruise is like, oh, you can't do it, can you? You can't do it until... Why can't he do it again? I forget.
He's got the location of the plutonium, I think, still.
Oh, yeah, something like that.
Or he can't do it until he's got the plutonium.
Something like that. There was a reason. It sounded fine in the moment. But this is where Henry Cavill says, okay, I have to leave you alive, but here's the thing. Here's the insurance policy, and he pulls out a photograph, he puts it down towards the bottom of this like mesh elevator floor, and Tom Cruise looks shocked. and it's a picture of his wife, Michelle Monaghan. They've got a photograph of her. And
I know it's like an actual photograph of her in a crowd, but like the way you describe that, it just sounds like a headshot. It's just her action headshot.
But he's like, hey, if I see you again, if you try and get in the way or you try and save her, I will kill her. And it's like, okay, do you know what? Say if we didn't do the 2 dream sequences where we see her already in this movie, seeing her face in a photograph out of nowhere like this would have hit so hard. It would have been such a hit.
You're right, but I also understand it from the filmmaker's perspective of we are hoping to keep on bashing records of box office to the point of we want to get people who may not have seen previous Mission Impossible films.
Okay, sure, right? But you've like 99.9% of the movie still functions in that regard. Do it with the one thing that would have impact if you didn't like set it up earlier and just hit with it. And it would be a big thing for people who remember who this is, and it would be like, hey, she wasn't even mentioned in the last one, and this feels like a big deal that they're even bringing her up again. So
yeah.
I think it would have been a good moment if they had just held, and plus I think the dream sequences are kind of stupid as well, so that's also a reason why I'm complaining about them. But it's like, okay, so we get this big shot where he climbs up to the roof, and by the time he gets there, though, Henry Cavill's already in the helicopter with Lane. They're off to go do what they're doing. And we get this big helicopter shot of Cruise standing on this rooftop, and it spins around him as we're at the top of London, blah, 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 blah. It's all very cinematic.
We're at our highest physically, but lowest emotionally point. We have no idea where to go from here.
Yes.
All right. So, I mean, we'll get to it more as we go on, but I said this at the beginning, and I couldn't really go into it with spoilers. I think having the wife is kind of a nothing point. It's a callback to continuity, it's a callback to doing all that, but it doesn't expand on the idea of Ethan not willing to sacrifice one life for the whole world. It doesn't play on that. And then it also doesn't really mesh. Like, the wife doesn't do anything that is completely impossible to have another character do. So it just kind of feels like fan service almost in a way, or just a little wink and nod for people who wanted that character back, or they just wanted to play with the continuity of saying, hey, check it out, she's still here, she's still around. And I think that goes double because the very next scene after this is Ving Rhames sitting down with Ilsa and basically giving the audience talk of here's who the wife was, here's how their relationship went, and now we're just fully explaining how it is, because it hasn't mattered for 2 acts and it will barely matter in the 3rd act.
I think you're being a bit too cynical about this. All
right.
Because I think the moment where we realize that she's there, which is a surprise, right? It's kind of like, hey, like there's this medical camp that's been set up here, which is where the nukes are. And it's not a populated area. The whole plan here with the nukes is that it's going to like ruin a lot of the water supply for like basically they say a third of the population of the entire planet, because it's right between China, India, and was it Pakistan? I think was the other one.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, but it was like, hey, this is going to potentially impact this entire region. Like almost all of Asia might be affected by this to be this big thing. And they go there, and it's like, hey, for some reason, the bad guys are the ones behind the smallpox thing, and that's why this medical camp's there. Why did they go out their way to do that? They set that up, and then we get there, and all of a sudden we hear her say, Ethan, and it's like, oh, the wife's here. This is why, because they went out of their way to make sure the one person that Ethan cares about is right next to where the nukes are going to go off. It's this personal vendetta thing. And I was okay with that, just on a villainous kind of like, oh, F you to Ethan, right? I was totally on board with that. There's a bunch of things I really like about how they handle this, actually. One is that I love that when her new husband's standing there, Ethan basically says in code that I'm here working. And she like immediately gets what that means, and she looks over at Benji and Luther, who are standing just kind of in shock that she's there. And I'm like, I really, because that's one of my favorite scenes of Mission Impossible 3. And I didn't love all the stuff they did with the relationship in 3, but the one scene that I really liked was the scene where she was like, hey, you've got this, there's something you're not telling me, and he's like not telling the truth about the fact that he's a spy and all that, but she kind of like gets like some of it and trusts him anyway, even though she doesn't have the whole information. I kind of like here that she's now in on it. Her new husband doesn't know anything that's going on, but Ethan's kind of making it clear, I'm here working. and she sees the rest of the team, and she's like, oh, something. Oh, like she gets right away that this is very serious. And I think the way this does fit into the themes of what the movie's doing, not that it needs to fit that into the theme for it to work this way, because you could just argue it's the classic idea of, well, a group of people don't mean that much, but one person we care about means way more to the audience. So it works in that sense where there's one innocent person here who would directly die because of these nukes instantly, that we now care about, instead of it just being the big grand idea, however vague it is, of this would eventually hurt a lot of people, but they're all faceless. It's just a group. So you've got that, but it does kind of fit into this whole idea where Ethan just can't protect her here. He can't just, because I'm sure he wants to. I'm sure he wants to, grab her, get her in a car, and drive as quickly as possible to get to the safe distance or whatever it is. But he can't. He basically just has to say, so, I'm really sorry I'm here and that you're involved in this, but I need to go. I've got nukes to stop. And he just runs off. And I think that's the one kind of tie into the themes. But I do also like that she sticks around and she sees that Luther needs help with, like, cutting the wires in the bomb. He specifically says it needs an extra pair of hands. And as soon as he said that, I'm like, do you know who has really good hands that's good at doing little minutia stuff? Doctors, because they, if they're surgeons at least anyway, are good at that kind of thing. That makes some sense to me. So I was okay with the idea of adding a bit more personal stakes to it. Now, are you telling me that the third act would still be pretty solid and doesn't need her? That's also true, I think. I don't think it's, like, crucial to what's going on. But I don't think that it's... I think the inclusion is a nice inclusion that I don't think tries to pretend to be more than it is. And I think the few moments that we have with Ethan and her, or her with even Luther, I think are nice moments that make it feel like she wasn't just disregarded. And I know 4 kind of did that as well, with the reveal at the end that, she didn't die and that he's kind of keeping tabs on her to know that she's okay. In my head, I remembered her just disappearing after that. And I actually kind of like that they gave her a little bit of a more happier send-off here, where it's like, oh no, she's got a new life, she's happy with her life, she's helping people. And they kind of further set up the idea right at the very end that, oh, I'm where I am supposed to be and you're where you're supposed to be. And the fact that you're out there stopping the nukes is what makes me sleep at night. Because how many times would we be in the shit if Ethan Hunt wasn't off being, super mission man? Yeah.
I mean, I agree with what you're saying on surface level. Like, I understand what you're saying, and for the most part, I agree. I think having it be part of the villain plot is a good in concept sort of thing, except that all of this stuff that's happening seems more like it's Lark's plan than it is Solomon Lane's, and Solomon was the one who really had a hard-on for going after Hunt. I feel like if we're talking about Cavill here, he shouldn't care. But it seems like he set all of this up before even the movie started. Like, that was already a thing that was happening.
We never really know. But we never really know whose idea it was. I have to assume it was Lane's idea. Like, Cavill probably did a lot of the work, but I have to feel it came from Lane.
I mean, I guess probably, but it just...
I just have to assume that.
And even if it is Lane, I still don't feel like Lane is a strong enough villain for me to think that, like, okay, fine, he's put this into motion at the very least, but it doesn't feel strong enough for him. And then the other part of it is that I like how it ends, and I do like giving her that little happier moment. I would say that if we have that moment, cut out the Ving Rhames talk or trim it maybe just a little bit, because he basically says the same thing. He says, oh, as long as we're out there, or as long as they were together, bad things were going to keep happening, but they had to split up in order to, like, stop that from... Let Ethan go out and do his job, more or less.
Well, the funny thing is, though, is that talk, though, maybe aside from that part where he goes maybe a little too into what they say at the end, is that scene is basically accomplishing what you were concerned that they would lose if they cut out the dream sequences. It was like, no, this is the explanation for anyone who doesn't know about the wife. But notably, that came after the photograph, so the impact of that could have still been there had they cut out the dreams.
Right, but that's the issue, is I feel like, talking about act structure, the photograph is the clear delineation of second act into third act. Like, that is exactly where it happens. I think that having the wife stuff outside the dreams only being focused in the third act doesn't see her well enough in this movie, and it kind of like would still feel like an ass pull. I understand you feel differently, that you think having it hit then is just kind of this big reveal, but I don't think that it would flow as well.
I disagree. It's a movie series. It's not an original film. It's a sequel. It's the sixth in a series at that. I think at a certain point you have to trust the audience to some extent that they're not all standalone films. You're allowed to have some things that come back from previous films that you don't have to overly set up from scratch again. And I'll maintain that. But like, and I'm not saying this stuff with like her being back in the third act is genius or that it's like amazing, but I'm saying that there's a couple of nice things. I like the inclusion. I like her getting a little bit involved in a way more believable way, by the way, than anything she did in the third act of the third movie, where she all of a sudden was taking on gunmen by herself. This felt like it was actually using the skills that she would have in her job in a way that made sense, but could help what they were doing. Like, you know, especially since the idea is like, you know, because like Luther's on the comms talking to Benji and Elsa, and they're like, hey, tell her to leave. And he's like, where's she going to go? Like, the nuke's right here. Like, she's not going to get far enough away.
Yeah.
So,
although I think that is one thing that they could have altered just a little bit and make me like it a lot more, is once Ethan sees her there, have him have the crisis internally of, do I save her and like just let the nukes do what they do, or like hope the rest of the team can handle it, or do I focus on the nukes? And I don't think that was even up for like a question. I think he always was like, no, I know that I have to go get the nukes, and I'm just going to let her be what she is. I think have him even just pause for a moment and say like, we got to get you out of here, and have her just corrective like, you know what you have to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think they were going for this idea that, like, he knows that that's not a decision here. Like, he knows that what the choice has to be, so he just has to immediately make it. Would it have been arguably better if there was just a little moment where he is tempted to not make that choice? Maybe. I don't know. It's tough to say. I do kind of like the immediate call to action of, like, okay, I have to go. Like, I have to go deal with something. So the setup of the ending, though, obviously, Ving Rhames finds one nuke. Elsa and Simon Pegg are looking for the other one, which... Can
I just chime in real quick with, apparently, there's a whole long thing here about what the nukes are and how they work.
No, this is literally what I was about to say.
Okay, all right.
The two nukes basically are designed so that if one is like tried to be disarmed, it'll set off the other one. There's like a fail-safe where one will go off no matter what. And the only way to disarm them properly is to pull this like pin that's in the detonator like device, right? Which is something, it's basically a walkie-talkie that Henry Cavill's got on him. Whereas Lane...
And it's not even intentional either. Like, it's the thing that Benji finds to glitch in the operating system, that if they do this all perfectly in sync, then it'll work. Yeah.
Lane, on the other hand, though, is not leaving, right? Lane's going to go down with the nukes. He wants to, like, go out in glory with his explosions. So, cool, whatever. Basically...
I do love that the actor wanted to die in the last movie. Apparently he didn't. Like, he wanted to be gone with the last movie, but he was brought back for a second one. I like this being basically his Han Solo moment, where it's just like, if I have to go, if you don't give me enough money, I'm happy to die here.
But he's sticking around. Henry Cavill's got the detonator, and he's leaving on a chopper. So the whole thing here is that we have to like be able to disarm both bombs and cut the last wire at the same time. But we can't do that until the pin's pulled out of the walkie-talkie. But this glitch, this thing that will kind of trick it into not, like, setting off, will only work if it's already counting down. So, now, admittedly, the bad guys are going to start the countdown anyway, so it's not even like... It would have been one thing if they had to, like, intentionally start the countdown themselves, but that never became a factor, because the bad guys already set it off anyway, so whatever, it doesn't really... So fine. Yeah. But, so it's like, okay... Find the two bombs, deal with that, and because Lane's still here, it means that Elsa can have her big final fight with him. Whilst, by the way, she's like trying to stop Benji from dying because Lane's like hung him up from the ceiling. So we get her like kicking a box under his feet and stuff like that as she's trying to fight and whatnot. But she gets to have her big climactic fight with him, and this is all intercutting between these two groups while Ethan's doing his job, and his job is to get the detonator and pull the pin out. Which means climbing up the cargo that a helicopter's carrying, because there's two helicopters that are leaving. Henry Cavill's on the other one. He's climbing up on the one that's behind him, and all of this is in the IMAX, ratio. It looks gorgeous, and they're shooting in, I don't know if they're in actual, what was it? Oh, I'm trying to remember the place they were in.
Kashmir, India.
Yes, thank you. Well, they shot it in the real place they say they are, I don't know. But they were shooting stuff in real locations where there's nice vistas in the background. It looks stunning. It was all really nice. Mm-hmm. And this is where you get all the big action set piece stuff with Tom Cruise climbing up a rope and dangling off of it and kicking pilots out of the chopper or whatever. And basically like, oh, how do I get to the other? Because he's talking to Benji and that. He's like, okay, I'm in the other chopper. I'll get to Henry Cavill though. And they're like, how are you going to do that? You're in the other one. It's like, I'll think of something. And he eventually tries to drop the payload that he's carrying on his chopper onto the other chopper, but he misses. But that alerts Cavill that he's there. So then he gets a gun out and there's a whole chase and there's...
It's a dogfight scene pretty much.
Pretty much, but it's really well shot. Like all this stuff is really good spectacle. So I think props to the fact that this third act is a really good countdown to the bomb goes off type thing where they're all doing stuff intercut. Really good big set piece stuff with Cruise up in the helicopters. And I think the thing that I'll also praise it for is that, and this is partly why I say it's got the best third act of any of these movies, is that it's also peaking in the third act, as opposed to a lot of the other movies where they peak somewhere in the middle. This is actually ending with its best set piece stuff. You can disagree, but you're wrong.
Yeah.
But you can disagree.
It's hard for me to say that anywhere else in the movie is higher than this. I think that there was a little bit of me that would like to say that the first part, like the part that came just before the motorcycle chase, where it's the getting Lane around, I think that might have been the closest I got to peaking beyond this. But no, I think that this one
What's
peaks,
your
but
phrasing there?
I'm not sure what I said.
It was the closest I got to peaking. Like that.
Yes. Sorry, let me be more clear. It's the closest I got to orgasming.
There you go.
Yeah. So when it comes to this sequence, I think that it is doing a great job, but it feels less like impressive to me and more of the editing and how it's all put together is just giving a more emotional punch. And that's still like part of it. I'm not saying that that's not to be included, but if we're talking about like the quality of the set piece, I think I would probably go with the Throughout the Streets of Paris more than I would here, because while the dogfight looks great and all that, by the time they land, it does kind of feel like we're just on a set rather than, actually on location doing a thing.
At the very end of it, once they've landed, because there's like choppers rolling down a snowy hill and stuff. Obviously, we're dealing with effects at that point.
Right.
But a lot of the climbing up the rope and just some of the great footage of them in the choppers flying, I think just looks so good. It has that sort of big effect that, not a visual effect, but that big kind of like spectacle effect that some of the bigger moments and because I think there's like several scenes in this one that are better than anything in the fifth one. Like that's like I do think this is night and day. This is a much better movie than 5. With all its faults, with and I really didn't like a lot of the first act. But I think for me, the more the movie goes, the more it becomes about these big sequences and less about the convoluted plot. And the less I have to think about the convoluted plot, and the more I can just enjoy how well the action scenes and the chase sequences are put together, the more I'm having a good time. And I think, because it goes from the London stuff and there's a little bit of a fill-in in between, but then we're right there in the third act with all the stuff with the bombs. I'm into this. And then, of course, you've got the final little bit of this helicopter thing where Cruise and Cavill are fighting on the cliff. And there's a couple of things I really liked about this. Is one how Cavill eventually dies, where Cruise just like pulls down the cable that's got a hook on it, and it literally catches Cavill's head and pulls him down with the chopper. Really fun final beat. But something else I really liked here, bizarrely, even though it kind of only works because of the second movie, is that there's a moment when they're both dangling off the side of this cliff after they've been fighting up top, and the detonator thing's up at the top of the cliff face. And there's a moment where Cruise just lets go of the rope that they're dangling on and just starts climbing on the rock face. And I thought, Yeah, because he's good at this. He knows how to do this. The series has established this. He's in his element here. And I felt a little bad because I'm like, yeah, but that was a terrible movie. But this is actually Cruise. He can do this. He's a rock climber.
I get what you're saying, and I thought the same thing. But it was immediately overridden with, no matter how good at rock climbing you are, it's going to be easier to climb the rope. Like, this felt more to me like just so we could have the final bit of him pulling down the rope. It didn't feel like there was an in-story reason of why should we ditch the rope.
No, there absolutely was. You're completely wrong on this. The rope had already slid when they were trying to climb up. It was clearly unstable, so like he had to switch to the cliff face.
No, it slid down the one time, but then it caught again, and it was obviously catching enough to not only hold the two of them, but the helicopter as well. Okay.
No, this is bullshit. Like, it slid once, it'll slide again. Like, if it already slid once,
not necessarily.
It's
like,
holding
I'm
up.
talking about the.
It's
I'm
holding
talking about
up
the major slip.
It's holding up an entire chopper. There's no way it's going to hold that weight for very long. And it's already slipped once. It absolutely makes sense to me that he thinks this is unsustainable. It's safer to switch to the rock climbing. I completely disagree on this.
All right. I'll give you that he thinks it's safer too. But when in the hell has he ever cared about what's safer? And we already have, countdown-wise, that he's got maybe like 30 seconds at this point to get up and grab that walkie-talkie and pull the pin. I think that scrambling up that rope is the far more sensible option of getting there quickly and doing the thing.
I mean, but
especially because it cuts to him on the cliff face, and just from the position they're at, it doesn't look like he has a damn thing to grab onto. Like, he's standing on a ledge and it's sheer for like 12 feet up.
I mean, at that point, you're just critiquing like normal movie things where it looks like it's impossible, but then the character does it anyway.
It seems like an impossible mission. Why would I think the Impossible Mission Force could do it?
Exactly, they could do it. So what's your complaint?
Not that I was just pointing out how you phrase that.
I don't know. I think you're being especially nitpicky here.
It is very nitpicky. I'm not going to argue that like this is what ruined the scene for me or anything like that. It's just something that as soon as they hopped off the rope, I'm like, the rope seems faster. You haven't given me a reason that doesn't seem like the rope seems faster.
It seemed dangerous, right? Like it could fall, but the time he gets to the top, it seemed to make sense to me.
That's fair.
You know,
can I point out one thing about this sequence though that I thought was making a reference to something, but I just didn't get it.
What?
Was as Cavill is in the helicopter and things start going all wonky with that, he gets sprayed in the face with what I can only assume is boiling acid, because I don't know what other liquid in a helicopter is going to cause this. And we see the side of his face is like Two-Face-esque in a way.
He gets like scarred, kind of, and it's all down one side. It looks menacing.
It just struck me as like a reference to like maybe a character from the original show or something, but like, I don't know, the way they revealed it, it just seemed like this was a bit like the sort of way that James Bond series like does the reveal of Blofeld or something like that, where it's like, oh, check it out, it's this character now. Bet you didn't see that coming.
Nope. I felt none of this. It's just he got burned on his face with the fuel or whatever. Obviously it's not acid. I get why David said it that way. He's referencing Batman Forever. But you know, his face gets burned, and this is just the reveal of like how sinister it's almost like in the moment it's like, hey, now he really wants to kill Tom Cruise because he's just done this to his face.
You know what I wish it would have done? I wish it would have burned off his mustache, just as the ultimate petty move of like, no, we let him shave it in the end. Screw you.
But that's assuming that this shot these scenes in order, which is very rarely the case.
Apparently the last thing they shot was actually the Halo jump, the big airplane skydiving scene.
Fair enough.
So, yeah.
No, I thought this sequence was fun. Like the fight was good, the climbing up, and like the other two characters having to just sort of hope that like, hey, we just have to hope that he's pulled the pin, and we'll wait to the last possible second to cut the cord, because we may as well give as much time as possible, but we just have to take a leap of faith and hope that he's done it. And
the radio goes out somewhere in the middle there. Like, they aren't able to get confirmation when he does it.
Yeah, he's long lost contact by the time he's doing this. So it does a cut to white to sort of like do a little fake out of like, did it go off? Did the nuke go off? And it's not. It's just the sun, and he's like, it's fine. And that's pretty much it. You get a little scene at the end where he wakes up in the hospital bed and he has a one-on-one with the wife, who's like, you're the hero and you're where you need to be. The others come in and say hello, but I did like the line where Benji's like, how close were we? And he's like, the usual. I was like, oh, okay.
Okay, cool, great.
Yeah.
Happy to hear it.
Yeah, so the movie just ends in him laughing and hurting that he's laughing, and that's, cut to your titles.
It does, I mean, you mentioned it before with the wife, but it does feel like it puts a full capper on that story. Like, it doesn't feel like we're ever going to see her again. Because not only does it have her married again, it has her with another person. She has her final send-offs here where she says, like, I'm happy you're doing this. I want you to continue doing this. And I found peace in my own life because of the ways that you've pushed me as a person. So it's everything's cool. We're all good. There's no bad feelings, and I am free to live my life. And then there's kind of this visual element of, I would say, a passing of a torch with Elsa, where the two speak briefly for a moment.
Well,
and
you say speak briefly. Elsa leans in and whispers something into her ear, and I was having like a lost in translation moment of like, what did she whisper? See, if it was the other way around, I'd be like, oh, I assume it would be like, the wife being like, hey, go get him. I approve of you jumping on Tom Cruise. Like, I am done with him, right? But the fact that it's Elsa leaning in and whispering, it's like, wait, what is she saying to the wife? Is it? I almost like want to joke and say, oh, it's like a little threat. It's like, he's mine now, bitch. Like, move.
She just leans in. I already did.
Anyway, that's how the movie ends. It ends on a fairly happy note. Yeah, I was not expecting us to be complete opposite ends of the spectrum here.
Yeah. I mean, I still liked it as a movie. I'm not saying that it was like a bad movie or anything like that, but we liked different parts of it for different reasons.
Yeah, but I think this is night and day from 5. I think this is much better than 5.
I agree. I think this one is better than 5, just in the viewpoint of, at the very least, our biggest criticism there was it felt like there was no real villain force to really lock onto. It was all this nebulous, who can you trust, blah, 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 and what's actually the plan. This one makes it very clear beginning to end, and while it still keeps the villain a mystery, it doesn't keep the villainous entity a mystery. We still have a very clear thing that Ethan is going up against, which makes it more enjoyable beginning to end.
Yeah, but also, to somewhat contradict that, my biggest complaint with 5 was the shit villain.
No, I feel like that's what I was saying. I was meaning to say that at the very least.
Well, I mean specifically, we did have a character that we could focus on, and he was shit, and he was trying to be menacing, but failed miserably.
Well, I'm talking. That's the villain. When I say villain, I more so mean about like the things they're doing, because obviously you can have things like the Syndicate, but what is the Syndicate actually doing? Vague, terroristic, whatever. So like, it's not interesting to have that.
I get what you were referencing, because I had that complaint as well. We talked about that in depth last time, but I don't think that was the top. I think the top complaint was how shit the villain they gave us was.
yeah, absolutely. But that's why I like this one going into it, is because they straight up say they've got nukes, or at the very least they are going to get nukes, and it makes it very clear. Even if the apostles as a concept is kind of like whatever, the concept of nukes is very easy to lock in on and say, well, that's a bad thing. I know how bad that is.
There's absolutely still a list of things to complain about. Like, I mean, I don't like most of the opening act, right, barring a couple of specific fight sequences. But the convoluted plot, all the stuff with the broker, the White Widow character, I just think that she doesn't really add much to the movie other than just sort of add some padding. I think you've got those repeated things that I don't like, which is, oh, someone thinks Ethan's actually the bad guy. Maybe he'll have to go rogue, or blah, blah, blah. Oh, someone's going to turn out to be the villain who was supposed to be a good character. Like, it returns to some of the tropes that this franchise just keeps doing over and over again. So, yeah.
I think I agree with you in terms of the tropes and all that sort of stuff. The only one that I would argue a little bit is the convolutedness of the plot. I think when you really break it down into its most base components, it beginning to end, it's just make sure that they don't get the plutonium. Like, that is...
Okay, I'm going to fight you. I'm going to fight you by asking you one question.
If it's about the broker, I admit that the broker makes it convoluted, but anything else, continue.
Well, I guess it's related to the broker, but
Okay.
who had the plutonium in the middle of Act 1?
Okay, again, that's something I agreed. That's not a convoluted plot. That is one element of it that just doesn't feel thought out. Because, no, to be a convoluted plot, it would be making it so that they have to jump through hoops to explain who had it in the middle of the plot. But they don't even bother explaining it. It just feels like a straight up plot hole, but that doesn't make it convoluted.
I disagree. It's convoluted.
Okay, hold on. I think I cracked this because I think we both had a misunderstanding as to what was happening. I will admit with this realization it's a little bit more convoluted than I was saying before. All right, so here's the realization I had. The Apostles always had the plutonium. What the White Widow did not have it. She was just acting as the broker. The Apostles were willing to sell, were willing to give up the plutonium in order to get Solomon Lane back. That's the whole reason that they were willing to do that. But of course they were going to double back on that deal. Of course they were never actually going to give plutonium. But on paper, that's what it was they were going to give up the 2 remaining plutoniums in order to get their leader back.
Yeah, that never occurred to me the entire movie. So, and it's maybe not even a case of it being, I mean, it is a bit convoluted, but it's maybe even less that it's convoluted and more just so that it rushed through these beats so quickly that there was not enough time to process that the one side was just like wanting both things. I don't know.
Yeah. I think for me, it's kind of an audience thing where we all know they're not going to give up the plutonium. So to say that they're willing to is just kind of like, well, we know that's not going to happen. Like we're already looking down that path. For
the record, understanding that better now does not make any of that stuff more enjoyable in hindsight.
No, not at all.
It doesn't suddenly mean, all clicks together and like, I'm like, no. I didn't enjoy the process of like them having to make the deal. I didn't enjoy the process of going to see the Shadow Broker or whatever it was. I keep calling her the Shadow Broker. She's the White Widow, but
what is Shadow Broker? That's from something.
It's from Mass Effect.
What Shadow Broker? Okay, gotcha.
It's from Mass Effect. I know I'm letting my other influences break in here.
That's fine.
Yeah. So, this is exactly the sort of thing where like, even going back to the very first Mission Impossible. All the talk about who has the knock list, and he goes to that woman, but she was doing it for some other guy that he's pretending to be, and like, okay, who actually wants the knock list, and blah, blah, blah. Like, this series has always had this problem where it tries to overly complicate some what could be relatively simple plot beats, and I don't know,
you know what it reminds me of is that we did half of the Fast and Furious movies. At this point, a third.
I was going to say that wasn't half.
Yeah, it was the same sort of thing where it felt like a lot of the earlier movies were just overcomplicating what should be a rather simple franchise, a rather simple idea of what it ended up being was just heist movies with cars. The earlier movies had that sort of problem where they were trying to do a lot more than that. They were trying to overcomplicate the formula, and it just feels like Mission Impossible is sometimes they're dabbling around what the correct formula is, but it feels like they are almost ashamed of making it that simple.
Do you know that I think it is? I think they're really convinced that they're making a spy franchise, and I know that technically Ethan is a spy. But they think that being a spy franchise means just making things sound like really complicated, when in reality all the good stuff about these movies is the big action set pieces, and like just give them a mission, have them go pull it off, and something goes wrong, big set piece happens, boom, simple. Yeah. But they're obsessed with double crossing and like who's working for who and layers upon layers, and it is by far the thing I like the least about this franchise. So I like when they do the reveals of showing like, oh, we were actually doing this the whole time. I like the way they handle those. It's just the in-betweens where they like debate it and they have the audience have to wonder, oh, who did this, who did that, all that other stuff. That's what annoys me. Yeah. I'm genuinely curious how much of this stuff is in the show, like the original show. Like from what I gather, the show is a lot more of a kind of a heist show where the entire point of it is they get in and get out without ever being noticed. So it is a lot more of like a spy, like close to Hitman sort of thing,
where it's just get in, get out, and try not to make a mess.
Yeah, but when I say they're trying to make like a spy franchise, I'm not talking about that kind of. I'm talking about because that's what I want. I want just like heist and action set pieces. This whole like double crossing upon double crossing, who's a double agent, a triple agent, like all this stuff, like they seem to think that's important to this franchise, and it's by far the worst thing in the franchise. So especially since they kind of keep doing it the exact same way, and it's just not that interesting. Weird rant here to wrap things up, because I was actually quite positive on most of this, and I think it's the second best movie in the franchise, and I think I stand by that, having finished it again. But you do have to get through a bit of the shit to get into the good stuff. So you know, it is what it is. With all that said, though, let's get to picking the things. All right, David, what was your scene of the movie?
Oh boy, my scene of the movie. I think I'm gonna go with the sequence of the dream version of getting Solomon Lane out, where it's just the score is the only thing you hear, and it's just the shooting of the cops, because it's just really well done. Like, even if it's not even actually what's going on in the plot. As much as, you know, the action set pieces are great, I love them and all that, but that's the first time that I felt like there was a lot of real thought put into the emotion and the cinematography and the editing to really make that moment pop, even more so than the action set pieces.
I mean, I guess it's the helicopter stuff, or maybe it's kind of weird though, because I'm kind of including everything that's cutting around, because it all kind of fits together so well,
right,
and builds together. But hey, it's the first time I think I've picked the climax of one of these movies, so I guess that's worth something.
I can't remember if we picked the climax of the first one, because that was pretty good as well.
You may have done, but I definitely didn't.
All right, fair enough.
So yeah, all right, MVP of the movie.
I'm picking, honestly, between Tom Cruise once again or Henry Cavill, because I think that he does a good enough job. It's not a complicated character the way that he plays him. It's not like he's, you know, trying to be all buddy with Tom Cruise the whole way through. It's always an antagonistic role. It's just a shift of how villainous it is. But I like him as the character that he is, and the real question is, do I think that he does better in this than Ethan does in terms of like character development here? I'd say yes. I see the point they were going it with Ethan saying he doesn't, you know, trade lives. It's not one life or millions or anything like that. He always cares about the one life. But I don't feel like outside of that one cop sequence that was explored to its fullest. I think there needed to be just something in the climax that still hits on that just a little bit that would have really sold it for me. But without that, I don't feel it had a punctuation mark. So I'm just going to say Henry Cavill was a lot more intriguing as an overall antagonist than Ethan Hunt was as a hero in this particular one.
It's funny, I like a lot of this movie. I don't know if I feel particularly strongly about any individual character or performance. I don't like Solomon Lane, but he's not as bad as the last movie just because he's not the main villain anymore.
Right.
It's tough. I almost want to say the mustache. Just for what it represents.
That damn mustache. I will say this is the perfect time to give it to whoever the composer is, because the score was very, very good as well.
That's true. The score was the best of these movies. And I noticed again a bit better in 5, to be fair. But I think this one, this did stick out to me a bit more. It felt a bit more confident and more like it was adding a lot to the film. So yeah, maybe I'll go for the composer. I was into that. Yeah. And for all the jokes we were making about ruining Justice League, like, that was not that movie's only problem. Let's just be clear.
Oh, God, yeah.
That was problem.
10,000 problems. We did a review of the Snyder Cut.
We did.
That was one of the first reviews I did.
The Snyder Cut, though, didn't have the mustache removal
That's true.
issue. So that was a separate theatrical cut problem. Anyway, all right.
Final scores.
Yep.
I don't know. I feel like this one is, like we said, probably the best final act it's been since the first one, but I still feel like I like 4 more than this by like a significant margin, and it is a lot of that team aspect of it where it's still kind of the Ethan Hunt show for a lot of this. I'm gonna come down at a 7.5. I don't think it's quite in that great territory for me, but it is still good, and I would put it above 5, which I gave a 7. So
yeah, I'm actually giving it the same score, 7.5. I wouldn't quite call it great. It's just uneven enough, and the plot's kind of just nonsense at points. That I can't go into great territory, but I do think some of the set pieces are great, and I think the back half is a lot of fun. So it is my second favorite of the series, at least so far. We'll see how I feel about 7 next week when we get to it.
And then, of course, does it make the cut? I think yes.
Well, sure. I I was, if anything, more positive than you were to a point, but
yeah, no. I mean, again, I point out my nitpicks. I say the problems I have with the story, but enjoyability wise, like it's a blockbuster film, and it feels like it. I'm still having a decent time the whole way through. It's just every once in a while I got to remember, oh wait, I shouldn't be thinking during this part. I should be enjoying the scene.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I'd say it's in the lower end that makes the cut, but it makes the cut.
Okay. Fair enough.
All right. Okay, well, next week, obviously, we'll have Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning. Just Dead Reckoning. It's not part 1 anymore. They've redacted that. It's just Dead Reckoning.
How many times is Tom Cruise going to do this, where the DVDs already go out, and he says, oh, no, it's actually a different name now?
So, yes, that is what we're obviously doing next week. And then it'll be time for the brand new movie, which I got a trailer for this week at the movies, actually.
Oh.
I won't spoil anything that's like in the anything that's in for the new movie, but they did like a bunch of quick cuts of like stuff from the old movies at one point, and I was like, oh man, nostalgia! They're hitting me with all these bits, and because I've been watching them all, I remember all these bits because I just watched them all.
I imagine the quick cuts were like, hey, there's the 4th one, the 3rd one, there's a gap there, and the 1st one.
Dear. So we'll see how we feel about number 7 next week. Of course, like I said at the start of the show, you can support the podcast and the other stuff here on MailFuzz Movies by going over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and supporting for as little as $5 a month, and you get access to 2 monthly shows that me and David do on Patreon. One is called Extra Reels, where we review some of the worst things ever made. We did a spy movie this month, the 1998 film The Avengers.
Look, I don't know whether spy or movie is the wrong word to use for that, but one of them is wrong.
They could both be wrong. I wouldn't argue with you too much.
Yeah, that's fair.
But yeah, so yeah, some of the worst movies of all time, and then there's Criterion Cut, where we review movies from the Criterion Collection. So if those sound like an interesting thing, or you just want to support the content and help keep it coming, you can do that via Patreon. You can also do it via YouTube membership if you prefer. Any support from any direction is greatly appreciated and helps keep the shows coming. So that is us. Thank you very much for joining us. We do appreciate it. We'll see you next time. Keep watching movies. And of course, if you can get it, it's always nice to have diplomatic immunity.